Hey,
Yo, we're on. Hold on, let me click the button. Uh, there it is. Dan,
what's up, man?
you're on Philosophers on Twitch playing Flight Simulator. How do you feel?
I'm excited.
Nice. Good to have you, dude. I'm excited too. I made sure to do all Flight Simulator updates before starting the show because sometimes we get caught with like a 20 gig update. That's no good.
That was very prudent of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Only the best.
Yeah.
Is God Save the Queen royalty free? I don't know. No, that's a joke. I see the. Is God Save the Queen royalty free? Dan,
Yes.
we got to choose a location.
I know where we're going.
All right, hold on. Let me tweak my audio balance just a little bit. By the way, people
Let's
in
fly the
chat.
Bermuda Triangle.
That's amazing. That's a great idea. I can't believe we haven't done that before. We've never done that on the stream.
So, like, we can start in Florida,
Right.
and then fly down those islands towards Puerto Rico, and then go north towards Bermuda. And somewhere in the middle of the ocean there, when we've completely lost sight of land, mysterious things will happen.
All right. Let's see. So Florida, maybe Miami.
Yeah.
Sound like a good.
Yeah, we should make from like Miami to Puerto Rico. And at some random point on the way there, we'll take a turn north and go into the triangle.
See. Oh, I see. Oh, I see. So that's the path. Here, let me see if I can actually pull this up on the stream because it's kind of cool to have the. Here we go. Window capture. One moment. Move this up. Is it there yet? No, it's not there. Hold on. Give me a second. This is important. This is the tech support portion of the show.
Yeah, what's the problem here?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a problem so much as an opportunity.
It's a great attitude, Mike.
All right, Bermuda Triangle. I just want to show the Bermuda Triangle on screen.
Yeah.
There we go. An image, new tab. There we go. Okay, sweet. So we've got the Bermuda Triangle here, and then we will do that in our game. So we'll fly like southwest. All right, cool. Let's pick a plane. Let me start showing you the planes.
Yes.
So I'll slowly scroll through. We've got some fighter jets, some big like Airbus, Boeing 747. Then we've got some ones that kind of are like propeller planes over here, Some of these are little dinky kind of propeller planes. All right, let me hide the Bermuda Triangle now. It's kind of getting in our way. Some of these are dinkier than others. Some of them are more versatile.
Yeah. I feel like we should have like a fast but dinky plane.
Fast and dinky.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's see. So this isn't too dinky. The Textron Aviation has a 107 cruise speed. Oh no, 244 ktas. I don't even know what that is.
It's a bigger number than some of the other ones. That sounds good.
There's also, this even looks a little more. This has a lower. The other Textron Aviation Cessna is similarly fast.
Perfect.
That one does seem perfect. It looks like exactly the right sort of thing to get lost in.
I love it.
Yeah, to get lost in over the thing. All right.
Yeah.
All right. One more little tweak before we're on our way, which is that I got to change this music. I'm gonna hit. You will not be able to hear it, I believe. Jazz. The jazz is just consistently the right vibe, I feel like.
All right.
Balance between speed and dinkiness. Who do we have in the chat? We got Soren, Oyster, Lithros. Got some familiar faces. Vecnin has arrived with his "The illusion of time is a pervasive lie." What do you think, Dan?
The illusion of time is a pervasive lie. It's a bold statement.
It is.
So who's lying?
Who's lying, Vecnin? Maybe society. We are to ourselves.
Okay, so on our journey here, we'll try to contemplate the lie of linear time as we fly into the time-space anomaly known as the Bermuda Triangle.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so I don't know if you've seen this game before, but it is quite cool. And I can change our time of day. I feel like maybe just like like noon or morning, it's kind of good visibility. I can tweak other things like the weather, but let's make sure we have the clouds on.
Is there a way to have random weather? Like we won't know what it is when we get there?
Well, we can do live weather.
Yeah. We should try to inject as much randomness into this as possible.
All right. Let's start with the live weather and see what's actually happening. Time is a psyop. All right. Let's get this motherfucker off the ground. So I don't know a lot about planes. This game though is very detailed. I don't know if you've seen it before or whatever, but like you can see in this cockpit all these buttons. We can hit buttons. Some of them work. Got a throttle control. So this is for people who people apparently actually learn to fly planes in here.
So you're saying this is like accurate to the plane being simulated?
I believe so. Oh man,
it's an impressive effort, really.
It is. So we are flying over Bing Maps. Also known as like the world. All right, here we go. Getting a little altitude. This is an advertisement for Bing Maps. I would love to. I should get a goddamn like Microsoft sponsorship. Larissa, you played Flight Sim as a kid?
Wait, let's talk about sponsorships.
Yeah.
Like, Like, who should we advertise? Can we take money and just hype shit that people pay us for?
You know, probably. Is there any reason why not?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Hell
Okay, so
yeah!
who in
That's
the
what
in
I'm
group
talking
wants to
about.
advertise with us? I will say favorable words about things for relatively small amounts of money.
yeah. So Lithros just subscribed. So maybe Lithros gets the Lithros. What do we hype? Papa Bill eats off all of this. The I knew somebody who got a what is that beverage that has all the calories you need? Um, the Bay Area Soylent.
Oh, right, right. I
She
think
got a
there's one called Fuel also.
yeah. She got a Soylent sponsorship just by posting pictures like like of her like drinking Soylent on fucking Instagram and shit. I think it's doable. Um,
Let's get sponsored.
yeah,
Let's become hype beasts.
I would love
Okay,
to.
let's do some hyping. Well, Lithros gets a hype because he's subscribed. And hedonism. Okay, all right, let's the $0 tier of advertising for anhedonia is there's a kind of amusing Woody Allen movie about it. Go watch Annie Hall.
Annie Hall. What is Annie Hall about?
Annie Hall is about anhedonia.
And say more.
It's a stereotypical Woody Allen movie in which he goes way, way too uncomfortably deep into the psychology of extremely neurotic people of the
Right.
archetype that he represents. Um, it's really a movie about sort of existential despair and depression and um, living a comfortable life that feels soul crushing and awful despite the comfort.
Right. Right. Some of us at times relate to that, unfortunately.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a good movie if you want to laugh at yourself for about it a little bit. Sometimes it makes you feel better to laugh if you
So
can stand it.
I really liked. So by the way, this plane is kind of slow. I don't know. I think that's fine, but it is kind of slow. It's no fighter jet, that's for sure. I do feel like it's the right type of thing to get stuck in above the Bermuda Triangle, just thematically. Um, but we're making it. I mean, we're. I don't know if you can see. So on the little map, GPS tracking. This is me. This is us, and then I'm gonna start going tangent to that line, and then we'll be going on our path. Um,
Yeah.
I
No.
liked Midnight in Paris. Do you see that one?
No.
It's just like another Woody Allen movie with Owen Wilson.
I have not seen it. What did you like about it?
It has what did I like about it? I liked giving Owen Wilson a shot to um, like do a more serious role, you know. But he's still got his Owen Wilson charm. I don't know. I kind of like Owen Wilson. Um, it's very like it does that thing. There's a lot of like he's interacting with his girlfriend's like family, and they're all very focused on mundane things in a very irritable kind of like you're saying like neurotic way. And he's like, "Is there more to life than this?" And then drops through a portal to the 1920s, and then you know I don't know figures out meaning and shit. And we got Maltese in the chat. Malty and or maybe are in the chat. Oyster, we're going from Miami to the Bermuda Triangle. Hold on, I gotta get this.
What's the top speed of this plane? And are we there yet?
You know, you can see in the bottom left, we're going at 80 knots or KTS. Is that knots?
I think that's knots, yeah.
Yeah. So that's how fast we're going. I can change us into a fighter jet at any time, or even faster. Actually, the 747 is even faster than the fighter jet. Um, but as you can, we're still over Florida, so
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's going to be a chill journey for a while.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh my god, I heard a sound effect that I've never heard before. Someone gifted a sub. Hey, Roaring Poet with the sub to Oyster Smiling. Thanks, man. Welcome. Time plane never leaves and has already arrived. Roaring Poet has blessed the stream. Um, Dan, how you doing? What's on your mind today?
What is on my mind today? You know, I'm having a chill day. I um I just took a mental health day at work. I didn't even want to do it. So I've been just embracing my inner lack about just hanging out, going on walks, and being chill. That's the vibe today.
That's great. It's a good day to have. What kind of walk did you take? How serious of a walk are we talking?
About 6 miles.
That's a walk.
Yeah.
Um, the it's freezing cold by me, but it's thankfully uh, you know melting, so I'm able to get out of the house more. Um, 6 mile walk. Did you read? I don't know why I'm asking that. I guess that's because what I do on chill days, I tend to read more.
I did not. You know, I have shamefully fallen out of the habit of reading at the rate that I used to.
Yeah,
I think I went through probably a 10-year period of my life where I would do like one or two books a month, but back to back, no breaks, just probably read through a couple hundred books.
right.
And then I just like lost the ability to do it. I got old and stupid.
Uh huh. I'm
Maybe it
mixed. I often okay. Oh, we're suddenly we gained a lot of speed, but now we're losing speed. So this is one of those things where I don't fucking understand like what's happening, but like sometimes you just these planes, man.
is there wind?
Yeah. I actually think um this purple line in the top left corner of the screen, my mouse is on it now.
Oh, I see.
Maybe a wind line, but and I think they're showing me the wind relative to the plane's actual orientation, not the camera.
Yeah.
Lithros um, actually plays this game and often comments with knowingly about its mechanics and how planes work and shit. Um, Larissa, thank you for the sub. Glad to have you. Um, yeah, I just these days I find myself just buying books and then not reading them. I actually literally today got in the mail one that I didn't actually intend to read, but it's Nuclear Survival Skills. Um,
Like in a nuclear war.
yeah, yeah, it's a cool book. Um, it's this big red book. Hold on, if I adjust my trim so that I don't crash, I can pick up the book. Um, Nuclear Survival Skills. Let me see how that looks on there. There we go. Yeah,
Wow.
this
That's an
is.
eye-catching cover.
Oh yeah, it's got here. Let me find some like diagrams. Like here we go. Pattern for clear plastic cover for KFM can. This is an extra instructions page for like something you might build. Um,
What is that? What is it portraying?
paper scale to be cut out. I don't know. Oh, hold on. The plane is now turning back towards Miami. It doesn't want to go to the Bermuda Triangle. I don't know. I don't know. A KFM can, whatever the hell a KFM can is. Charging a KFM with hard plastic rubbed on dry paper. I wonder if it's like a radio. I don't know. I'm gonna have to actually look at this. It's just some wild shit. But anyway, that's a book I recently bought that I have not been planning to read until like we get bombed, but maybe sooner.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta just like you keep it in on the coffee table in the fallout shelter.
Right. Yeah. It's a good coffee table read for when you're having people over during the nuclear apocalypse. Um,
That is some Canticle for Leibowitz shit.
I keep hearing. What is Canticle for Leibowitz?
That is a delightful sci-fi book, one of the OGs in the post-apocalyptic genre.
Uh huh.
Um, Tells the story of, I think he's a monk or some kind of religious man, um, living in a small community after the apocalypse,
Mm-hmm.
where they're several decades after a global nuclear war, and society has, been knocked back into a kind of medieval feudal technology level and also cultural level. And he works to recover lost texts and technologies and um, to try to kind of form a more coherent view of the past since that entire civilization was destroyed. That's really what the book is about, is a kind of dealing with history, I think is the main theme of the book.
Right. How was he like not born until afterwards or something like that, or does he like barely remember it?
I forget the exact timing of it. I think he was born after the apocalypse. It's been a few decades.
Right. That sounds awesome. I am pretty interested in that like conserving knowledge thing. Um, I don't know if you know 𝕬𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚 has all this stuff about intellectual dark matter. I just ran a book group on his stuff,
Mhm.
and he's got all this stuff on. Like one of his articles is like about how YouTube is amazing for knowledge preservation and stuff people used to have to like not even like necessarily even going to a library, but like get a human to show them how to do. It's like on YouTube now.
Right. I'm thinking of all the times I've not known how to like put put wall anchors in my drywall.
Yeah,
Just like household skills that I just don't do frequently enough to have any skill development for. Now I
right.
can just download them like Neo in the Matrix.
Yeah. Wrong Poet bought the Quigley from my reading list. Hell yeah, Quigley's amazing. I love Quigley. Oyster says there's 3 or 4 sections in the book. Each section is a different post-apocalyptic time period. Oh, cool. All right, I kind of want to read that. This is at least going to make it to my buy it and don't necessarily read it yet book, but try to read it. List, I mean. um, Wait, why were we talking about Canticle of Leibowitz? Oh, because of this nuclear survival book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So what inspired you to buy a nuclear war survival book, and where did you find it?
so I've been reading. Um, I've been reading Carol Quigley's Tragedy and Hope, which is a thick book, and this dude basically is like, here is all of human history up until the present, and he's writing this in publishes 1962 or 1966, and part of that is the whole like nuclear era thing, and then in this group I'm reading it with, someone was just like, oh yeah, I think it's a good idea for everyone to buy a copy of this particular nuclear survival guide just to have around in case, and I guess I was just like, yeah.
All right.
Uh, Wrong part. We're talking about this nuclear survival guide I just bought. The you know what book that Canticle for Leibowitz reminds me of? There's a book I read as a kid. I think it might be called The Postman. Have you heard of this?
Yeah, I think I have. I have a memory of there being a movie adaptation of it starring Kevin Costner.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He seems like the right person for some reason, depending on how old he is. I always imagine the protagonist being a bit younger, but it's like this
I like to
dude.
think that he's been typecast as the post-apocalyptic hero survivor. Like he also did Waterworld, right?
Oh yeah, that's another one I never saw, Waterworld, but I'm pretty sure
Like it.
I was at some kind of like Universal Studios type place where they did a Waterworld exhibit, where the people would just like do somersaults off of high places, and there would be like fiery explosions and like a show. Um, Ogilvy thinks I did see Waterworld. I don't. I'm pretty sure I didn't. The Postman is great though. I don't know why it was kind of influential to me, but it's like this guy finds like a skeleton wearing a in a in a postal truck, and it's, he's got the post office gear on or whatever, the outfit, and he's got a bag of letters. And so it's also post-apocalyptic, and so he decides to deliver the letters. It's kind of like a coming of age sort of thing.
Yeah, that's very poetical.
Yeah. All right, we're getting out to the ocean now. You can still kind of see land in the distance, but
Oh, good. We're making good time. We'll get there.
yeah, it's rather beautiful, if I may say so myself.
Yeah.
So Dan, now that we got you here, all right, and I'm all set up and everything. What should we talk about? We discussed earlier sci-fi, some spiritual stuff. Like I'd be kind of curious to hear about some like how you got into. So I'm if I'm understanding right, you do like your own mental practices of some kind. Um, when
Hmm.
people say meditation, they mean a lot of things by that. So I'd kind of be curious, like maybe that's a good place to start. Like, how'd you get into that, and what do you do?
Oh man, it's a topic I could talk about for a long time, but let me just completely derail you
Mm,
and say, let's talk about science fiction instead.
okay,
I want to get back to the spiritual stuff
right,
later.
right. Let's talk about
Yeah,
sci-fi.
yeah. I want to talk about some headcanon I have about Warhammer 40,000 and the ruinous powers of chaos and how they act as a psychosocial model for understanding the current historical crisis era we're living through.
Perfect. Let me catch you up on what I know about Warhammer because it's not much. So, my understanding of Warhammer is I know there's been all kinds of media. I know people paint miniatures. I know that it's like a crazy universe where there's these really extreme ideologies you wouldn't normally think of, and they like wage horrible wars against each other across galaxies and shit. And
That
yes,
is all correct, and it's even more than that.
yeah,
Um, all right, so very, very quick background about the sci-fi universe that I'm going to be talking about. Um, at its core, it is the lore and backstory for a tabletop miniatures war game produced by the Games Workshop company. It is a deliberate pastiche of all of the cool sci-fi stuff that has ever been created.
uh huh,
If it's cool, they'll do their own version of it.
yeah,
This is more or less the same approach that, say, Blizzard takes with the like Warcraft and StarCraft things.
uh
Same
huh,
idea.
uh huh,
Um, this has Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, who are like corrupted versions of them with skulls and spiky bits all over them. It's got the Space Orcs, who are like vicious barbarian pirates. Um, it's got Space Elves. It's got Space Dark Elves. It's got demons and angels and apocalyptic world-shattering weaponry. It's got starships that are the size of small city-states. It's got um, ancient gods who live in the warp and feed off of the psychic emanations of sentient beings. And this is fundamentally the background that the entire universe is premised on, that it is a deeply animated cosmos, and that thoughts and feelings and experiences and the phenomenology of the mind of sentience has a profound impact on the physics of the universe.
it's
So
interesting.
this is how faster than light travel is achieved in the Warhammer universe. A ship enters the warp by making a dimensional portal,
Uh huh,
and they pass through into a sort of hyperspace-like dimension where the rules of time and space are different and can be broken. So you take a portal through the warp, go through this weird dimension, and come out the other side back into real space.
uh huh.
Save a lot of time. But the warp is not like a stable or neutral place. The warp is a roiling ocean filled with demons and spirits and gods of all kinds, most of which are hostile and predatory.
Right, naturally.
Yeah,
This reminds me already of Mage the Ascension.
yeah, there's some continuity there. And I think that a lot of it is generational. Both of these things were created by um, Gen Xers, more or less.
Yeah,
So there's a kind of like 1980s aesthetic that's baked into a lot of it.
yeah, that's interesting. The other thing it made me think of is like it's Marvel, but if it were more consistent or something like that. Um, just because when I think of Marvel, it's just that everything is in the Marvel universe. Like they got magic, they got gods, they got science, they got like super science of some other type. They've got like, you know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, they have all of that in Warhammer 2. Like I said, it's a deliberate pastiche. If anything cool can possibly be done, they'll write a story for it and then sell a model for it. And
okay.
this is the business model. They make a lot of money selling pulp fiction paperback novels,
Uh huh.
6.99 each for a 200-page barn burner. And they also sell like plastic model kits where you get like a futuristic looking tank or something, and they charge you $75 for it, and you have to assemble it yourself and paint it yourself. So it's sort of a hobby, an arts and crafts hobby.
So do
And then
people
there's this
basically?
tabletop game you can play with this stuff, but it's not even a good game, to tell you the truth.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, do people basically play D&D with the miniatures, but with the Warhammer rules?
Yes, they basically do.
Yeah.
And it's an enormous pain in the ass. Imagine setting up about 100 little toy soldiers on a tabletop, and every turn, um, you and your opponent go back and forth with a tiny tape measure
Uh
and
huh.
move by hand all 100 of your little models.
Uh huh.
And then they've got to fight each other. So you got to pick up a handful of tiny little six-sided dice and throw the dice every turn and count the results and look them up on the tables. This is
Right.
all stuff that would be done by a computer in the modern era, but this came out as a tabletop game when computers like that didn't exist. So they made up a, full-blown human-powered simulation rules for it, and it's just miserable to interact with.
Yeah. The I are there now video games? I see ads for the video
Fun,
games.
fun. Yeah, it's
Okay.
become a big intellectual property franchise in the video game world.
Right.
And some
Right.
of the games are pretty good, actually. There's a really popular series called Dawn of War, which is cool.
Okay. So if I just want the lore, because Lithros said C.F.S. Kane novels are a great intro if you want to learn more. My instinct would be to go to YouTube videos, just because for Dark Souls and
There's a
shit.
thriving YouTube ecosystem of nerdy, neck-bearded gaming dudes who just talk all about Warhammer lore.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is called Oculus Imperia. Go
Uh
look
huh.
that up on YouTube if you're into it.
I'm gonna throw these in the. Where should I put this? In my Discord. Oculus Imperia, and then Lithros
Yeah.
said CFS Kane. Okay, wait. So then I want to hear your analysis though.
All right. So that's some background about what this thing is.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the mythology here to set up the metaphor.
Right.
Um, of all of the nasty things that live in the warp, the nastiest are the so-called ruinous powers, the four gods of chaos, who are basically the highest demon kings that have coagulated in the warp from the you know suffering and difficulty of existence. Remember that these things represent the basically emotional or psychological experiences of people who have gone through the events of life.
So we had a Chaos Prime on, and we talked about like egregores and shit like that. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm with
so
you. I'm with you.
you can think of these things as egregores, except instead of being purely psychological in their orientation, they have magical powers that can affect the physical world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Are they just
so
four
the
chaos
four
gods, or
chaos gods.
do they have different aspects or something? I assume like.
Hmm. Yeah,
Right.
so that's sort of what I'm getting into here.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, there are these four different aspects who are sort of a rivalrous pantheon of gods. Their names are Khorne, who's the god of violence, murder, bloodshed, war. Um, there is Slanesh, who is the god of um, decadence, excess, corruption. Um, there is the god Nurgle, who is the god of plagues. We've had a very Nurgle kind of a year.
Yeah.
Um, and not only plagues, but just sort of mortality, suffering, death.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's Tzeentch, who is the god of change, also associated with political revolution, conspiracy, um, and manipulation on a mass scale.
Zinch.
Yeah. Tzeentch is spelled with a T, TzeenTch. It's a ridiculous word. I think it's deliberately. Um, that's the other thing about the Warhammer 40,000 aesthetic. It's cranked up to 11.
Yeah.
Just everything is absolutely maxed out. They don't do anything halfway.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are the four ruinous powers. They have a kind of ranking, and the ranking represents a progression. So
Mm-hmm.
here's how it goes. The youngest and weakest of them is Slaanesh. That's decadence. The next one up is Nurgle, plague.
Uh-huh.
The one after that is Tzeentch, revolution. And the last one, the most powerful, the worst of them, is Khorne, war.
Why do these sound like metal bands? Have people made metal bands about these?
Yes, there's an amazing Warhammer themed metal band called Bolt Thrower. Check them out.
Okay. All right. Sick. That's sick. Okay. So I feel like I'm getting a whiff of where we're going with this, with the progression.
Right. So you're sort of connecting the dots. I don't have to say that much more about it. If you were to do a um, sort of prophetic analysis in the style of John the Revelator of the present era,
Mm-hmm.
and were to use the Warhammer mythos as your um, metaphorical palette to paint with,
Yeah.
maybe you would say we have spent a significant amount of time in our society in decadence, in a very Slaaneshi state, obsessed with our own trivialities, generating endless consumer content to keep people plugged into a machine that was degrading their lifestyle and alienating them from what was true, beautiful, and good.
Mm.
This was disrupted by a recent development with the coronavirus, which is a classic, manifestation of Nurgle.
Uh-huh.
Plague, of course, affects the flesh, which is why we fear it so much. But on the psychosocial metaphor, the plague is about fear.
Uh-huh.
We have been living in cowering in fear for over a year now, at a time when we've experienced political and social unrest and obvious signs of corruption and institutional failure.
Uh-huh.
If we were to make a predictive model out of this, we would say the next one up is Tzeentch. That's revolution.
Mm-hmm.
We had an attempted insurrection. That may be an overloaded term, but let's just call it a riot.
Uh-huh.
There was a politically motivated riot at the Capitol on January 6th. That's just a taste of Tzeentch.
Of what
Tzeentch
Zinch
is
has
also
to offer.
it's also the race riots over the summer. Tzeentch is also Antifa and the Proud Boys fighting in the streets,
Uh-huh.
right? And
Uh-huh.
Tzeentch is also radical revolutionary changeovers in ideology, as we may be seeing in our, say, university system.
Right.
And then the last one up is Khorne, which is bleak to think about, but we live in a world where there is lots of potential for big fucking wars to break out. We've had a long and uneasy peace. There seem to be significant, geopolitical rivalries, especially with regards to China, maybe secondarily with Russia, maybe other countries as well. Sometimes I think about the scenario like, what would happen if China just invaded Taiwan?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the last one's Khorne. Is that also spelled
Yeah.
like the metal band?
Khorne, Khorne.
Wait, which one is Khorne again? That's war?
That's war.
That's war.
Yeah, violence, murder. War.
Oh, I see. And I guess because war is like a major thing you do in this universe, it makes sense to that.
Well, yeah, the slogan for Warhammer 40K is in the far future there is only darkness and war, something like that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Like I said, they crank it up. They turn it up to 11. It's
Yeah.
as bleak as possible, and I'm sure that many people will observe that it is a kind of inherently neo-reactionary analysis.
Mm-hmm. How so?
It has as its premise that, and I'm talking about the Warhammer universe here now,
Right.
not my own explication of it.
Right.
The Warhammer universe has this premise that 10,000 years ago there was a golden age, and the golden age came to an end when the forces of chaos corrupted the universe, causing an outbreak of a giant warp storm, which destroyed one of the galactic empires. That was the ℙ𝕙𝕤𝕝 space elves,
Right.
and
Thanks, Obama.
shortly after that led to the Horus Heresy, where the military forces of the human Imperium were divided in half, and half
Uh-huh.
of them aligned behind a traitor named Horus, who was the Emperor's own son. He was betrayed by.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's been, a dark age for 10,000 years ever since that. So it's an inherently nostalgic, backward-looking premise.
Right.
The present seems terrible, the future seems worse.
Uh-huh.
um,
Yeah,
and
it's
and
interesting.
any ideas that are coming out of a setting with that premise are kind of, I don't know, marinated in that kind of reactionary attitude that it brings. Um,
I do wonder
and
if the
I
fall
think we see
from
this in a lot of the culture war about it, where like the alt-right is really fond of making Warhammer memes, and
I was
they
gonna
like
ask.
they get like picked on by the mainstream left, who views those as like maladjusted nerd kids, right? And all of that's true.
You're right, of course. I was gonna ask because I've seen the God Emperor Trump meme was
Yeah.
big. Um, the, so wait, hold on. I have many questions. Um,
Yes.
are there good gods in a straightforward way in this universe, or how is that?
Yeah, sort of. Like I mentioned, the space elves, the Eldari, they used to have a pantheon of at least not obviously evil gods.
Yeah.
Um, they had one called Asurian, the Phoenix King. They had one called Isha, the Holy Mother. They had one called Vol, the Divine Smith. Sort of classic mapping onto Greek or Roman style of
Okay.
pantheon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and the chaos god Slanesh was born due to the decadence and excess of the Eldari Galactic Empire. So basically, Slanesh is a demonic form of an elven god.
Oh, this is. I mean, it's very. That's very Tolkien esque, right?
Yes, extremely.
Is the orcs are like twisted elves, or I forgot the exact mapping. The Uruk-hai, the goblins, all
Hmm.
that shit.
Hmm.
Elves. Are there elves like I would imagine? Are they like pointy eared elves?
Yeah, they're like tall and skinny and beautiful and have pointy ears and advanced technology and are, yeah, space wizards.
It's pretty
It's
sick. Yeah.
it's every cliche you think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Malty wants to hear about drugs at some point. There's some DMT discussion in the chat because space elves. I think that is the relevance of that. Um, Luther says the elves are super racist. Um, okay, so they have these gods, but are they as like relevant or powerful as these?
They're dead.
Oh, they're dead. Okay, so we're having a bad time.
I mean, there are other gods who are not chaos gods, so they might be trouble. Like
Mm-hmm.
um, the orcs have their own gods, who are a pair of twins called Gork and Mork, the gods of brutal cunning and cunning brutality,
Uh huh.
because that's what orcs are. That's what they do.
Brutal cunning and cunning brutality. That's sick, dude.
Yeah,
I like the twins. I think Norse mythology has twin smiths.
yeah,
They're,
yeah. I think Balder and Freya were twins.
oh, are they also? Um, I was thinking of the Smiths. I think there's like at least this. They also show up in God of War, but they're dwarves. I think dwarf Smiths. But yeah,
Hmm.
maybe Balder and Freya. Um, the orcs are really good at believing stuff. They paint their cars red so they go faster,
This is
and they
true.
do.
Red ones go faster, and
Mm-hmm.
it's reflected in a game rule where if you paint your orc truck red, it moves faster. You get a bonus inch.
Is are the mechanics just like unbelievable? There's matters of degree here, right? So like I used to play Civ, and I thought Civ was a complicated game until I encountered Crusader Kings. Um, I believe it Vogelfrey's urging. It how does it compare to D&D? I guess, and I know there's many different ways of playing D&D that are more and less extreme.
I mean, the D&D player experience is you're managing one character,
Mm-hmm.
and you can make some decisions about how your character levels up and what equipment you use and stuff, but
Right.
it's not that much. Um, Warhammer, you're managing an entire army, a roster.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more like, say, Magic the Gathering, where you're building a deck. So there are a lot of game pieces, and you're thinking strategically.
Right, I see. Um, word.
The complexity level is fairly high, and the game is notoriously imbalanced in favor of whatever the hot new shit that Games Workshop is trying to sell at the moment.
Or
It
of
just
course.
like if it's new and it costs a lot of money, then it's gonna have overpowered game rules because you're gonna buy it.
And then do they nerf it later, or do they just keep
Yes, that is
compounding?
exactly how it works. You get like about a year until they do the next release, and then
Mm-hmm.
they nerf the old shit, and the new stuff is overpowered. Got to
Okay,
keep
so,
it going.
so it's totally intentional. It's just a
Yeah,
plan.
it's intentional. It's shameless. Everybody knows they do it. It's
Right.
just,
Right.
that's how it is.
Right. Um, I imagine there's different eras and shit that different campaigns take place in with different geopolitical setups, I guess. This is mostly in space that this is happening.
It takes place over a gigantic galaxy. The scale of this is like Star Wars, like
Uh huh.
the whole galaxy.
Uh huh. That is pretty cool. I remember being a kid and some kid at camp was telling me about the Star Wars extended universe, and I like lost my mind at how cool that was because
There's
I'd
so
just seen
much
the
of it.
movies.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Vecnan has painted other things red for a bonus inch. Thank you, Vecnan, for sharing that. So I'll keep thinking about that. Um, I've looked at pictures of really beautiful models, but my net worth is lower than most of them. Yeah, I guess you probably have super big spending
Yeah. Yeah.
collectors and shit. It's like they say that furries are rich. Have you heard this claim?
No. What does that mean?
They claim that like furries are rich. Like there's a lot of people in the furry community who want to like buy furry art and make furry costumes, and they're just like happen to be a decent number of well off furries. I guess I was wondering about the about the Warhammer like fandom, right?
I guess I don't really know.
Yeah.
The stereotype I have of it is like, imagine a dude from like the north of England with a
Hmm.
real long beard and a beer belly, and he he like has his garage converted to a gaming workshop.
Yeah, that sounds
I don't
awesome.
know what his like economic prosperity level is. Probably like kind of middle class, but
Right.
um, it's like it's priced the same way any kind of absorptive hobby would be priced. Like if your hobby was flying airplanes for real, you would
Yeah.
spend a lot of money renting airplanes, buying fuel for airplanes, taking flight classes, and all the stuff that goes with that, right?
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, like they expect people to engage with it as a hobby and be willing to drop like, you know, paychecks on it because
Yeah.
it pleases them.
Yeah. Do I guess because it's older, I'm wondering how much of an intergenerational thing that is. There is, in terms of people interacting who are different ages. Um,
Yeah, that I wonder too.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really um, a part of this community except as an onlooker and fan of the mythos. I
Hmm.
haven't owned actual toy soldiers in 15 years.
Yeah. Lithros says he's doing the same thing. Just books video games in the RPG, but never bought a model or played the main game. Um, I started thinking of this first when with Minecraft, because like little kids, like actual kids, 10-year-olds and stuff, play Minecraft. But I also played Minecraft when it came out when I was in college, and there's a bit of a like, oh damn, like you maybe actually play the same game as the the next round of people. There's
Yeah,
something cool about that.
I just want everybody to play Mario Brothers 3 for NES.
Yeah.
That's my intergenerational. I think.
Recommendation.
Well, I guess they're emulators, so it's kind of preserved. But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like that's a classic, and that's my classic. That was the game.
Yeah. Yeah, my first system was a PlayStation 1, but I had friends who had had Nintendo stuff before that, and I was addicted. Um, what games are you into? What games do you play?
At the moment, it's World of Warcraft again.
Right,
It's
right.
been such a weird experience because of the deep nostalgia trip. The last
Yeah.
time I played that game was probably 2007.
Yeah.
Um, that's been fun. I've been hanging out with the in-group guild. We're
Yeah.
on the Misrael server alliance side if anyone wants to join up.
Yeah. How big of a crew is there?
It's small. I think we've got maybe 3 dozen on the roster total, but about 10 people who are
Who
active
actually
play
play?
frequently.
I'm surprised it's not bigger, to be honest.
Well, it could be. You guys need to, sign up, get in it.
How do they get in? Asks Oyster. Contact Eigen or Liminal Warmth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just mechanically speaking, make a BattleNet account, download the client for World of Warcraft Classic, and subscribe for $15 a month.
There you go. I played so my back in the day like super nostalgia games were like the Baldur's Gate games and Neverwinter Nights, which I think were just less popular than WoW. But recently, when did Classic come out? Last year or something? Re come out.
I don't know. Yeah, 2019 sounds right.
See you later, poet. Um, yeah, Larissa loves Baldur's Gate. But I had friends who were like, dude, we're playing Classic. You got to join up. And they're like so hyped and shit because they grew up on that, right? And then I played for a while. I have a character named Joseph Biden, um, and he's a warlock. And I don't know. I got him to like level 15 or something like that, like or like 22 or like something like that. Um, but
It's not
damn,
a
dude,
fun game if you're just playing by yourself. It's only worth doing as a social experience.
I did have a group. I just like we would get out of sync because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So I'm just like scraping up bits of XP as best I can while getting killed. And like my people are like, "Oh, you're not like level 35 yet? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe someone by you will help you out." Like um, with that dungeon. But I suppose I could be. It does sound fun to play with the group. I know someone. Maybe was it mechanical? No, Olibot started a Minecraft server.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, by the way, it looks like we're getting some lighter blues in the water. I feel like I'm noticing that if that's not my imagination. I feel like we're getting some real like Florida water.
Yeah. Where are we on the route?
Um, well, there's
No
Florida,
time to turn north yet.
and we're a ways. So there's
Oh, yeah. We got
yeah, we're a ways from Puerto Rico or whatever. Can I make this like real big or something? Will that work? Let's see if it'll let me zoom out more if I make it real. It does not let me zoom out more. But anyway, we're a ways. Put this back to a normal size. There we go. Bahamas water. Maybe Dan requested that we go to the Bermuda Triangle, so we are flying southeast from Miami towards Puerto Rico, and at a certain point we're going to turn north and go deep into the triangle, which I've never done on this show before, despite having run 12 episodes or whatever, 11. Um, okay, so you're playing WoW.
yeah.
Um, just hit me with a here are games I've loved.
Here are some games I've loved. So recently I played Hades on my Nintendo.
Okay, I
That's an
love
extremely
Hades.
good game.
I
Yeah,
love
that
Hades.
one's
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Um, I have been a fan of all kinds of extremely complicated strategy games. So played a lot of Stellaris, played a lot of the Civilization series, um, Alpha Centauri, which is kind of like Civ. Um,
yeah,
I don't know, just a bunch of those kind of turn-based strategy simulation games.
yeah,
The more complicated, the better. Um, I have played a bunch of role-playing games. All of those BioWare games that you mentioned, really
yep.
into it. Classics in their own right. There's
Nice.
a um, recent game in that genre. I think it was released by Obsidian called Tyranny. Tyranny is a really cool game. If you like the gameplay style of Baldur's Gate, this one has just a really unique story where you are more or less playing from the perspective of the evil empire.
Yeah, I've seen ads for it, but I didn't actually know. It's just a similar game style, but different crew, different developers or
Yep,
something.
yep.
Yeah,
Different game system. Like it's not technically Dungeons and Dragons, but might
right,
as
right.
well be.
I've been replaying Baldur's Gate 2 recently. I bought Baldur's Gate 3 and never got that far into it, but I do want to keep playing it. What did you mention? I love the Dragon Age games. I played all the Dragon Age, except for the Inquisition. I just couldn't get into.
Tried to play Inquisition and I couldn't do it. It was
Something
They
was
were
different.
obviously trying to make like a World of Warcraft kind of game out of it. It looks like they were building an MMORPG and then just gave up halfway and we're like, we'll release it single player. Fuck it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Mass Effect. They're redoing Mass Effect soon, or like remastering it, and they're gonna charge $60 for like the collection. I don't know if that's like worth trying, but might be cool. Um, yeah, and the I've been thinking about Stellaris and Alpha Centauri because I have been wanting to play a complicated space colonization game since watching The Expanse, which I have not finished. And if anybody spoils
Yeah.
it for me, I will never forgive you.
Well,
Um,
Stellaris is very good, but it has this problem that the genre has in general, which is you know if you're gonna win a very, very long time before you actually complete the win.
yeah,
So if it takes 300 turns to win the game, you'll know if you're gonna win on turn 100.
uh huh. Okay, so a Civ can be a little like that.
Yeah.
The game kind of ends when you've got your sufficient dominance over the board, basically.
Yeah, you become unassailable.
Uh huh. Uh
But
huh.
it just takes a very long time to actually reach the victory condition.
Right. Makes sense.
Is
Programmable.
Stellaris or Civ 6 the better play? Civ 5 is the better play.
Thank you. Thank you. I love
And I
Civ
like
5.
Civ 6. It's a good game. But I just feel like Civ 5 was just a, a bit better designed. It felt like it had more balance. It was a little bit more streamlined.
The theory I've heard about Civ games is that they're unbalanced until the DLCs come out. But I think a lot
True.
of the DLCs did come out for Civ 6, right? Um,
Yeah, it's been out for a long time now.
like I think Civ 5 had some balance issues when it was early. Man, I should play some. Man, just getting in the zone with Civ. I've just had some great experiences getting like in the fucking zone.
Yeah,
You know?
it can really get you in a flow state. You're just like, I am the manager.
Yeah. I even would try to play Civ while listening to like a history podcast, um, which is a little bit too much tension between activities, between giving each your full attention. But I was having fun. I remember it's like stuck in my brain. I was playing Persia. I think I was listening to one on the Crusades, which doesn't really work, but it was a good vibe. In group Civ when I've done PvP like with friends for Civ, like, and that's fun, but it's energy to get everyone together. Oyster, I like The Expanse. Have you seen The Expanse, Dan?
Not really. I watched a couple episodes, but didn't commit.
Yeah. My opinion on it, again, this hardcore, no spoilers, but my opinion is it's better sci-fi than most, like, commonly available sci-fi things, but worse acting than some TV shows. So depending on how much that annoys you, um, but I like
I
the
don't watch a lot of
scenario.
TV in general.
You don't watch much TV,
No.
yeah. Um, Sci-Fi faves.
Um, okay, greatest sci-fi movie of all time is the first Alien movie.
Mm, mm. Interesting claim.
Um,
I love that. I do love that movie.
it's spectacular. I think they just did everything right. Um, I think there's a cult classic sci-fi horror movie that I'm especially fond of called Event Horizon. It's great.
Oh,
It's
is
very, very campy. It's a little over the top, but it takes itself seriously.
wait, is that Schwarzenegger?
No, no, no. Let me get the link for you.
What? Why am I thinking of Schwarzenegger? Something else with it. Arrival's incredible. I loved Arrival because the source material is incredible, which is Ted Chiang. Dan has linked Event Horizon. Cool. I won't read too much.
Infinite Space, Infinite Terror.
Cool.
That was on the movie poster.
Cool. Yeah.
So that's a great sci-fi horror movie. It has a very young Lawrence Fishburne
Mm.
as a space captain,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it rules. It's got um, an experimental warp drive that goes terribly awry,
Uh
and
huh.
there's an incident or two or three. There's lots of space madness and space murder.
Yeah.
It's great. It's all around the full package.
Have you seen Sunshine?
Nope.
You might like Sunshine. I recommend it to you if you are into the space horror. Um, kind of Sunshine's cool. It's got great sci-fi elements. They're like flying to the sun to restart the sun or something like that.
Restart the sun.
Yeah, the sun's losing juice, and they gotta like nuke
Wow.
it to restart the something to
Taken on an infestation by the Fotino birds who have been eating its exotic matter.
yeah something. It very well could be. Um, okay, you love Event Horizon.
Yeah. Oh, people making good suggestions here. Annihilation is a great sci-fi movie.
Yeah,
Contact is a great sci-fi movie.
yeah,
Um, Contact is far more optimistic than almost any of the movies that I will ever recommend. That's Carl Sagan for you.
yeah. Oh wait, Carl Sagan's involved with Contact?
He wrote the book that it was based on, and he was a
Oh,
producer on the film, or his
cool.
wife was. I think he was dead at the time.
Wait, that's like really important lore that I didn't know. I have seen Contact.
Yes, it is deeply connected with Carl Sagan.
Yeah, that's super important. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting. Um, okay, you got to give me your Interstellar take. Whether you like Interstellar, people split
I
hardcore on
mean,
this.
good effort, good
Uh huh.
effort.
Uh huh.
It's a flawed movie. There were things about the directing of the movie that I think didn't work as well as I would have hoped for.
Mm.
Um, there were things about the script that were awkward too. One of my pet peeves in movies is if they if they sort of do the lazy trick of running characters into bad situations that were like too obviously bad going into them.
Mm-hmm.
Interstellar had this problem a lot. It just over and over again had like I get it they were sort of desperate, but
It's like you
um
should have known better.
they should have known better. Like so many fucking unforced errors in there. It was just hard for me to take this crew seriously.
Right.
It eroded my empathy for them. I was like, fuck you guys, you're dumbasses. Go die.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I can see it. I think I loved it. Um, cause I just totally tripped balls in a great way with some of the time dilation stuff, and that
Yeah, that
was
was cool. It was cool. I
yeah.
think that like the good thing about the movie was Nolan just had free reign to explore funky visual storytelling tricks with wild sci-fi ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Couponet, what you mean the James Cameron Avatar movie or Avatar The Last Airbender? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna assume he means the James Cameron movie since that is
Yeah.
an actual sci-fi film. Um, in terms of the story, Avatar was Dances with Wolves in space. It was
Yes.
a tired, cliched story. Um, it's fine.
Last
It's
Samurai
fine.
in
Not everything
space.
needs to have like an original take. Like genre stories are cool. I read lots of genre pulp. That's not a disqualifier.
Mm.
Um, Obviously, they spent a ton of their huge budget on celebrity name actors who maybe underperformed. Though I will stand for Ridley Scott all the time or
Mm.
whatever her name is. Um, have I forgotten her name? I don't get. Doesn't matter. You know, the visual style of Avatar is controversial.
Mm.
It really hasn't been. imitated very much. I think that that means that it's both iconic, meaning people wouldn't want to borrow the style because it would be too closely associated with a different thing.
Mm.
Um, but also that it's maybe unappealing. That it certainly did not really spin off um, a copycat genre if they were like telling different stories with that type of high motion capture, high fidelity, almost uncanny valley like rendering. So, maybe it was a failed experiment.
Or is it expensive?
That was really expensive. They spent like $300 million on those movies.
But then is that the kind of thing that's like half as expensive 2 years later, or not so much?
I don't know. I wouldn't know how to estimate that. I would assume so. Like
Yeah.
once you've already built out a technology for its first use, the second use reuses it much cheaper, right?
Right. Right.
So how does that calibrate for you? Where am I on the couponaut scale at the moment?
Yeah, I that's another one where I think I'm very willing to forgive a lot of flaws in media if they've got one thing that's sick, you know. This is my generally my experience where I don't always need it to be a cohesive whole that works because that's hard. That's quite hard to find. But when you do find it, it's that's the best shit. Couponut thought Avatar was garbage.
Interesting.
Do you have any clue what island we're over?
Nope.
Yeah, well, there's a big ass island southeast of Miami, and we're over it. Looks populated.
Is that maybe the Bahamas?
Yeah, could be. Yeah, that sounds right. String of Islands by Miami. Bahamas. Yeah, I agree with that, Luthros. Oh yeah, the 3D. I forgot that they did the 3D version. I feel like I haven't seen like people
Oh, right.
trying.
They had us putting fucking goggles on to watch these movies. I remember that.
I
I'm glad they stopped. That was lame.
it never quite was that good, but occasionally I'd get like a glimpse of like, oh wow, they got me with 3D.
Yeah. The best movie I saw that was made for 3D was Coraline, which is the Neil Gaiman story that
Oh
they made
cool.
a computer animated movie out of. And like a lot of the 3D movies were especially lame because they weren't designed for 3D shots. They just used a post-processing thing
Mm,
to do it. Um, which is sort of like highlighting. Like it doesn't make a really deep experience. But Coraline was actually shot for 3D and had a special like film track that worked with the goggles or something. I don't know.
right.
It was clearly a more sophisticated implementation of it. It worked really well and it was a cool experience. And you guys will never ever get to experience that. They're never going to screen it like that ever again.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I feel like if any of these experiences were that amazing, the
No,
world
they're
would.
just novelties. They're sort of cheap thrills.
Yeah, it's like the world figured out a way to repackage it and sell it to you again later because that's what we do. Um,
Yeah.
3D TVs, was that a fucking thing? Something in my brain is ringing a bell with the 3D TVs. Maybe saw it in theaters. Um, VR movies or something. I'm sure that'll be a thing.
I'm a VR skeptic. I think that
Yeah,
putting goggles on your face is just never ever going to be popular.
yeah, that's interesting. How, how big is VR gaming?
Not a thing.
Yeah, they keep coming. I keep seeing demos that look cool as hell, but it's not really like I have a friend being like, "Oh my god, you need to play this." Like,
Beckton is very sanguine about this. We are living in a simulation. This entire experience is virtual, which
and
is why, of course, time doesn't exist.
I mean, that thing just
Except, how would you account for the computer clock cycles of the substrate thing running the simulation. That's got to have time.
Ooh. Oyster, I don't know what you just said, but it kind of I don't know what that I had to block that message, but feel free to rephrase if it's not what I thought it was. um, the lag causes nausea. Ugh. Yeah, I
So,
won't.
so the argument is now a timestamp doesn't mean time exists. Hmm. 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 Okay, so a timestamp does imply a sequencing, and then we have this sort of operational procedure in order to bring something into our consciousness so it can be experienced.
Uh huh.
We we use this sequencing, right? So like maybe it's an artifact. Maybe time as we think of it is much more related to our need to like process data in our meat brains or wherever else this is happening. But um, how do we conclude from that that time is fake? I think that that's not justified fact.
Each moment in all possible universes exists. Sequence exists. Memory exists. Vectin, I want you to write a script, and then I'll read it in the punchiest voice I can, like movie trailer style, and I'll take it super seriously.
See, he says it's very straightforward because each moment in all possible universes exists. But no, I disagree. You can't prove that. That's not a good assumption.
Vectin wants to call in. It's your call, Dan. We can block the Vec call or with no hesitation from
No, we
me.
need to settle this. This is an important matter for metaphysicians. Come on.
All right, Vec, you can jump in. You can jump in. Get in lobby in the Discord. But I'm gonna boot you at some
He
point.
does need to get a beer.
Yes, to get a
Yeah.
beer. Okay. Well, when you're back with your beer, whenever you're ready, please let Vec call in. Man needs to be armed, beverage wise.
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
And we also have Twitter questions for you, by the way, whenever you want to
Oh, sure. Let's take one now.
rack those up. Yeah, go for it. Do you need me to link you, or
Um,
I think
I guess.
it's on my.
Yeah, that's probably
Yeah.
helpful.
All right, let me grab it from the Twitter. Our second home, or whatever. Here, I'll paste it in the Twitch chat.
Yeah. All right.
There might be a bridge you can fly under on your left connecting Nassau to Paradise Island. Cool. But I gotta stay on course because left is back west. And I keep turning left by accident because of the wind or something.
These are the mysterious ways of the triangle.
Oh shit.
Okay, so
Yeah.
here's the question. Vector of basis asks, where does the self end? I'm going to say we have some conventional boundaries, and then we have unconventional boundaries. We're going to have more agreement about the conventional ones. Um, the self conventionally ends sort of kind of at the skin in a physical sense, and in a maybe more expansive sense of the physical, you could say yourself extends at least as far out as your sense fields in terms of your hearing and vision and so forth. So you're sort of in contact with this sphere around you, what you can sense, right?
Mm.
So there's a kind of notion of the self in a physical place. There's a kind of selfness bubble, which is your body as well as your perceptual field. Um, And then there's the sort of unconventional notions of the self, which is we can talk about self in society. The self extends through an entire network of social connections, and at varying layers of distance, it's more and more indirect. So there's this sort of like exponential fall off. This is this, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Um, so you're like, the presence of the self in a person you're first degree connected with is quite high, actually. They have like a direct mental representation of you.
Right.
Um, third degree connection, they probably do have a representation of you, but maybe it's lower fidelity, maybe it's a bit parasocial, and so on. And you get to a certain number of degrees of separation where there's no homunculus of you in their head. You're more like an abstract idea. And then far enough out, they've never heard of you at all.
Right.
So there's a kind of fade out there. There's another notion of the boundaries of the self. How about the self in time, which Vecnan will, of course, vigorously object to?
Right.
But you have a lifetime. During your lifetime, you have a clear degree of selfness, but you have some kind of selfness before and after your lifetime. This is kind of the karma idea. Like you would not have been born except for your parents, and they wouldn't have been born except for their parents, and so on. That's genetic ancestry, but there's ancestry in many more ways than just your genes. There's this entire network of connections that builds up to produce the moment of life that coagulates into your human body.
The ancestors.
Yeah. And then there's the future. Yourself persists into the future, maybe literally in your children, the genetic replication, but also the ongoing impact of all of the interactions you had throughout your life. That's the sort of merit idea of karma, is like all of these interactions that you did. How much merit did they have? Do they improve or degrade the lives of others because of the way that you contacted them?
It's a solid array of lenses there, um, that I agree with. Yeah, I like the 𝕙𝕚𝕚𝕚𝕚 as, do famous people exist more because they live in more people?
In some sense, yeah.
Yeah, I think in some sense, yeah. Though again, the parasocial, the like what actually lives in the other people. It's like maybe you get a billboard in more people's heads, kind of thing.
Right. So here's a question on that theme. Um, what's the interaction between the Kanye West egregore and the Kanye West human being?
What is the interaction between them?
Yeah, because there's a man named Kanye, and he's got his life, and he's out there doing his thing.
Yeah.
And then there's the egregore of Kanye West, which is all of the beliefs that people have about Kanye West and the parasocial relationships they have with him.
Right. Right.
And these two things interact, and it's weird.
Yeah. I think this is common even at much narrower places than like Kanye West. I think people often will think of their boss as like not really being a person. And like their boss is like this like father figure or whatever, but like the kind of pixelation of them can be quite nearby, like quite early in the distance scheme. I think oftentimes celebrities are possessed by the egregores. The masters control theirs. Dangerous game.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable supposition. We've seen many times a celebrity apparently behave as if like demonically possessed. They go nuts. They have breakdowns. They develop drug habits. They hurt themselves and other people.
Right.
All kinds of shit.
Yeah, the Kanye West in particular, it's interesting because he was born again. And I believe formally put Kanye West under the under the aegis of the Christian God. And talks a bunch about like having been arrogant and that sort of thing, and like now he has like a way to serve and something he was unable to do before.
Do you think that his faith is a narcissistic type of faith?
It's possible that all faith is in some strange way. I think there's this way in which, like, in lowering ourselves, we can only raise ourselves up. There's a little bit of a Nietzschean angle there. Vecna, I did not forget about you. I'm going to add you as soon as I want to hear you ramble about time. But I want to answer the Kanye West question. Shut the fuck up, Vec. The I think there's some sincerity to it. I'll just go out on a limb and say I think there is at least some notable sincerity to it, and that's because I think he was being sincere when he said that he loved himself. If that makes sense, I think he like is really he's both performing himself but following some kind of spiritual gradient, and basically I believe him. Is how I put it.
Like you believe him about the sincerity of his experience as opposed to the content of it. Because I've definitely heard him say things like, I was chosen for God to run for president of the United States.
Yeah, but it's interesting because process-wise, he also says, you know what? But like sometimes, things go according to God's will, right? They go according to God's plan, and so, he talks about like things happening in God's time, and there is something like I believe. I mean, it's the same for myself, right? If I have a spiritual experience of some kind, I don't consider it as there's no straightforward epistemology, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's no like, oh yeah, I definitely know what this was, right?
That's why they call it a mystery.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, should we get? Speaking of mysteries, shall we get a Vecnan in
We're
the
going to
chat?
solve the mystery of time.
All right,
Let's do
Vecnan,
it.
I'm putting you in. Yo, Vecnan.
All right, I had to mute the chat. Can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome, dude.
Hello.
This is a becoming critter. Can you just start a becoming critter with Dan right now? And oust me for the show.
You want me to do the voice? This is a becoming creature. You gotta have the music, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, welcome. Hello.
Yeah.
You are now on my show.
Thanks for having us, Vic.
So what's up? How you doing? How you feeling? Are we getting straight into it? Or are we gonna have some chit chat?
No, let's jump right into it. I think Dan and you had something to talk about time. Now, I would say that
Sure.
that happened before, and that now we're going to talk about it. But you might take issue with it.
Correct. No, well, what you, in this essence, is what you're calling my past is just, for me, that's a completely different entity. So, like, you were talking to someone that has, like, that is located in my memory. So I remember that individual, but the memory itself is an illusion. Like, it is just some stuff that allows the possible universe to have some substance that that projects into this direction that people call time.
Dan, counterpoint.
Yeah, that's kind of like way too vague and complicated to really pin down. So like I feel like we got to start real small and then you work up to that.
Yeah, like what does it mean to project forward into time, and how does that imply that there is not a such thing as time?
Okay, so for to understand this, you really need to work with what you have. And if you really look at your own experience, the only thing that you have is now, right? Obviously, like if I clap or every single word I'm saying, as soon as it's in the past, it is like immaterial, unchangeable. It goes into the memory, right? But it is completely and forever gone. Now you can boil down each moment to a single type of experience, right? It's kind of like a felt sense. So you have the sense that all of this just happened, and you have the sense that maybe you have anxiety about something that happened in the past, or you have this emotion, you have this bodied sense, but all of that is discrete, right? Whatever you're feeling in that one single moment is discrete to that moment. So if someone were to kind of pull that moment up for you, you would experience the sense that time exists because you have this memory and because you have this anticipation of the future, even if all you're experiencing is that one feeling. Sure.
Can I pause you for a second? I want to ask a couple of clarifying questions. It sounds to me like what you've been describing now is the experience of memory as distinct from the existence or non-existence of time, which I would call a kind of fundamental physical
Yes,
backdrop.
correct. Yes. So memory is a different kind of thing. So if you don't have memory and you don't have anticipation, then for you there is no real time, right?
This is like,
Like-
if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, did it make a sound?
I don't want to agree, but I kind of get what you're trying to say. I get what you're trying to say, but I feel like those are different things.
So how do we clarify our terms here? How do we make sure we're talking about the same thing?
I feel like I have to paint a picture. I feel like I have to paint a picture here, and that will clarify. And it's basically, I'm getting a step removed from the truth here, but basically imagine if every possible universe exists. So that means everything from the start of the Big Bang to the energy death of the universe, and every possible iteration of every possible moment existed at the same time, the now, right? So the question for me is, why does this now exist? And I'm alive in this now as the wick is burning down the flame of the whole world. But if every single moment exists as now, right? If all nows exist, then the now necessarily feels like now. And so time itself doesn't actually exist. It's just that all nows do. Does that make sense?
There's a sort of classical answer to the question of why does this now exist, or why are we here, from Leibniz, who makes this argument about the best of all possible worlds. Are you familiar with this one?
Yeah. About God?
Right. Well, he says it's the expression of God's will as a divine creator being, that the universe is in the form that it is, and that it has to be because God is perfection. It's a theological argument as presented, but on a metaphysical level, it means something like the chain of causality is unbroken because of this discreteness of the past that you were noticing, and we get to where we are because of that chain of causality. So the universe can't be a different way. There is actually only one present.
Well, okay. So I don't think that concludes that there's only one present. Like, I think that every present can exist. Like, I don't think that rules out that every now doesn't exist. It's just that we can only experience one now at a time. Every experiencer is experiencing their now. So for every experiencer, there's only one now.
So am I getting this right? Is your view, Vectin, that all moments and corresponding experiencers exist in a way that you might call simultaneously, but it doesn't even make sense to call it simultaneously because that implies
exactly
time. But they just
exactly
exist.
So right, and to call it simultaneous doesn't make any sense, and to say that it exists for any period of time doesn't make any sense, because time doesn't exist, right? So like, the reason that the now is infinitely small is because each now is actually eternal and only exists for a single type of feeling, right? But all nows exist. And of course, the now feels like now because you have this memory, because you have this anticipation in the future. And all these things exist because the only possible moment that could exist is this kind of thing where knowledge exists and perpetuates into this expansion that is all possible universes. Now, the physics behind that, I don't actually completely understand. And I'm not sure anyone does, but there is some kind of expansion in the universe. That much is clear.
Okay,
Dan?
so the metaphysical premise behind your claim is the many worlds interpretation of the universe, which I think has some quantum mechanical mathematical models behind it too, and maybe some string theory stuff behind it. But I also don't really understand that stuff. Okay, I got you. I am not inclined to believe that interpretation.
Why not?
You have not convinced me.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. I mean, to be completely honest, I'm not trying to persuade you, but I'm curious why, or what to you tells you that that's not true, or that does not resonate.
I mean, the first one is just the kind of, Occam's razor law of parsimony thing. Just because you can make a mathematical model for something doesn't mean that it's a thing.
Sure.
And we seem to really only have access to this particular layer of reality. So,
right,
assuming that there are other ones, can be done as thought experiments.
Okay, I agree with you.
Level, but it doesn't prove anything.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So let me back up here. And my point is not that what I just described is true. All right. I'm not saying that all nows exist, but I'm saying that if you do this thought experiment where all nows exist, I am saying that that is the essence of how the now is actually experienced. I don't know if I'm being clear.
Are you saying something like that? So here's my recasting of your argument. I think you're saying first, here's a way it could all work: simultaneous experience moments. Second, if you look at your phenomenology,
Yes,
you will find
exactly.
that there are these traces of time, but actually those are merely memory, and that's compatible with the view that rather than directly perceiving time, you exist in an experience moment.
Exactly. So I'm giving you a thought experiment such that you can understand that if all nows existed, time doesn't make any sense. And so, because we only have this substance, we only have this now, it doesn't actually make sense to identify with the past, which is only memory. And we don't have any sense of identifying with the future, which is actually somebody else entirely. To identify with either of those things is completely insensible because the now is the only real thing.
What do you think, Dan?
Sounds like a cope.
What's it a cope for?
I'm sorry, I'm just being snarky. What do I think about that? We make choices about how we should identify with our pasts, meaning our memories, and our futures, meaning our anticipations, based on how we feel in the present. So we always have the choice of examining the memories and anticipations, those events of the mind happening in the present, and choosing our relationship to them. I think that we can view it instrumentally. You can select the relationship that accomplishes what you want.
I agree. And this is, so we're finally getting to the point that I really enjoy, which is that it's a kind of Copernican revolution, right? So the important thing is that everybody thinks that the past is really big and important and the future is really big and important, but it's actually the other way around. That the only thing that's real, the only thing that's important is right now, and that the past and the future are just these like much smaller, lighter things that we experience, that we taste, that are lived through us through ideas.
But just in purely pragmatic terms, our ability to anticipate the future and predict outcomes seems to actually matter quite a lot. And we do develop preferences around what we're doing in the present and what we would like to happen in the future. And we have some useful mental model of the relationship between those things, right?
Well, it's why we survive. Yes.
So probably on a practical or pragmatic level, Vectin is not going to be against, ordering food now so that you can eat it in 40 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think the
Right.
fundamental divide here is I'm much more of a pragmatist.
What I'm essentially what this leads to, where I'm going with this, is that now is really big. Now is all encompassing. Like now is the only place you need to be. And that if you actually simply inhabit the now, everything else is taken care of because of this, this anxiety and this concept of the past. That stuff like works through you without you even trying. So you can just drop all of your anxiety, you can drop all of your fear and just be, and that is sufficient. Right? So that's where you end up once you let go of the concept of time.
So if I were to restate in my version, it sounds like you believe that there's like a beneficial consequence to accepting this view.
Yeah, but you don't believe it because it's consequentialist. You believe it because it's true.
Right. You're believing it for real, not fake believing. Not.
Right. Yeah. You're not believing it for any ulterior motive. You just recognize the truth.
Right.
Like, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So Vectin has brought us the good word of there is no time here on Becoming Critter.
Yeah, I recognize it's a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah,
I recognize that.
Well, Malty noted that she does like that the common ground between you seems to be that we can think about time in ways that help us engage more deeply with our experiences.
Well, exactly. Like if you end up in any way becoming more present, that's good, right? I've just kind of like gotten there through this method that I'm describing, where like it is a really hard hack that if you stop believing in time, like being present is automatic. Like it's so easy. But it's very, very difficult to persuade anybody because
Right.
it seems crazy.
Right.
I recognize it seems crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Word.
Anyway, yeah, I'll let you guys continue the conversation. You can even disagree with me while I'm gone, but I'm
Right.
gonna dip so that you can handle the show.
Well, thanks for running this mini show inside the show.
This was a
Of
great
course.
call, and thanks for the bonus content, Vec.
Yeah, man.
They're gonna talk shit about me as soon as they leave.
Yeah, fuck this guy. Alright, boot him.
Thanks, guys. I'll see you.
All right, cool.
Can you believe that guy?
Yeah. What an
Okay,
idiot.
wait. So maybe Gray asked me a question while we were having that debate.
Yes.
So Dan, how does this fit in with your experience of altered states of consciousness? Which I think is a great question. It's a very, very common experience in certain states for time to get unbelievably fucking weird. Drug experiences classically do it. Whether that's just the sort of hyper focus of taking Adderall to the time bending far outness of a DMT trip. There are all kinds of trance states and meditative states that really strongly change your subjective experience of time also. All kinds of self-hypnosis and induced trance and the samadhi state in meditation of total concentration is like this. The conventional experience of time as having a sort of cadence and rhythm to it, which is approximately like what the wall clock counts out, and is sort of lined up with the rhythms of our bodies too, where the speed of our thinking is, at least in sort of the conscious narrative thought, is like conspicuously similar to the speed of your breathing, isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
And you can actually play with this deliberately, which is why they tell people to take 10 deep breaths when they're like too fired up and need to calm down. They're trying to slow down their breathing, slow down your thinking.
Yeah, you mentioned you were able to listen to my Hagakure thing. In that book, they say that it was something like the great masters used to make all significant decisions within the space of 7 breaths, which is an interesting amount of time. It's kind of long for a decision, but it's also very finite. Samadhi. Dan.
Yo.
I broke my arm once, and time slowed like crazy.
So you were like stuck in the pain of a broken arm for longer?
No, it was just the fall.
Oh, like on the way down?
On the way down, it was like, to this day, my memory, it's like every frame is carved in stone.
That's wild.
Yeah. It felt like time stopped, and I had like a million thoughts, in that period. And then it was like already over, but like it's just a very bizarre. It's almost like I remember. It might be that I remembered it being that slow, but I do think as experienced, it was like I got a higher frame rate. Yeah, maybe it's the same thing in a car crash. I also was in a car crash where a similar sort of thing happened. More memories being recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dan, I'm curious to hear more about altered states of consciousness.
Sure. I've been an enthusiastic psychonaut for, I don't know, fucking 20 years. So
Yeah.
what would you like to hear about?
Good question. Let me think. Well, usually, so I'm going to say what what I'm predicting your perspective is. I'm predicting that your perspective is that substances can be used in a safe way, following the right protocols. They can be used for insight, but some cautionary thing. That's sort of just, I'm trying to throw out some kind of baseline.
So you're saying I can skip the boilerplate and just get into it?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Um, I don't know. Yeah. What should I ask you about re-altered states of consciousness? That's my question for you.
Hmm. You're gonna make me like come up with a monologue on this. Jeez. Um, Dan is my number one for smart psychedelic advice. Okay, maybe that's worth talking about. It's sort of going a little bit back into the boilerplate thing.
Hmm.
And I'd love to talk about personal experiences, but let's actually talk more about the experience of bringing psychedelics into the mainstream of culture in a safe and responsible way. This is actually something I really care about.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a lot of history of these things. It's really fascinating history, especially in the way it intertwines with the kind of elite politics of the US in some very surprising ways. So I would encourage anyone who is into psychedelics to learn the history of it because it's not boring at all.
Hmm.
But let's just say there was probably some alternate future timeline where um, instead of Richard Nixon starting the war on drugs, um, the the psychedelics didn't, become fixtures of hippie counterculture and anti-war activists, um, and actually became a kind of ceremonial sacrament used by the skull and bones society elite types.
Hmm.
That's kind of where they were at in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who coined the term magic mushrooms, um, oh god, my memory's going to shit. What's the dude's name? I'm just googling real quick. Sorry.
No, totally. That's why we have it. Lithros mentioned Leary.
R. Gordon Wasson was the guy's name. I'm going to link in the chat here a Wikipedia article about it. Oh yeah, I should say something about Leary later, but first, okay. So R. Gordon Wasson was married to his wife Valentina, who was Russian, and there's this really fascinating divide between mycophobic and mycophilic cultures.
Uh-huh.
Anglo culture is generally mycophobic. They eat only a very small variety of mushrooms, and it's almost taboo to pick wild mushrooms.
Oh, you mean like culinarily?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Whereas Russian society is very mycophilic. They have a folk tradition of foraging for mushrooms in the forest. They get good at identifying mushrooms and familiar with different medicinal uses as well as, edible mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So Valentina was from a mycophilic Russian society, and she married R. Gordon Wasson, who was the waspiest of wasps. He was a J.P. Morgan banker, and he was a, amateur mycologist and ethnobotanist or ethnomycologist, which means that he had an interest in the way that human societies used mushrooms. He and his wife traveled to Mexico in the 1950s and met with some Mazatec Indians who had a psilocybin cult. I'm using cult in the anthropological sense here. It was not like a creepy cult. It was like a small religion. And he learned how they used the mushrooms. He learned what the mushrooms were, and he brought back a sample, which was analyzed by chemists at Harvard or wherever.
Mm-hmm.
And they discovered and isolated the psilocybin molecule, which could be synthesized. He wrote this article in 1957 and appeared in Time magazine called Seeking the Magic Mushroom. So this was the upper crust of society. This was a J.P. Morgan investment banker.
Yeah. Kind of
writing,
doing almost like the British adventurer thing.
Yes. Right. So this is a taste of the world that we didn't get. There was some world where the use of psychedelics for religious ritual becomes ensconced in the Anglo upper class of America. And that could have had an interesting outcome.
Right.
Speculatively.
That is interesting. But then
But anyway, so I think about that as this sort of alternate timeline that we didn't end up in. Sorry, Vec. And we ended up in the timeline where our culture's relationship with psychedelics got really fucked up. They got turned into a, set piece in the ongoing culture war, which has been so destructive to American society.
Mm-hmm.
They were sort of ghettoized, um, Grateful Dead fans and hippies and weirdos. Um, and it was especially tabooed in academia up until maybe about 10 years ago,
Hmm.
where it had a reputation as being a career ruiner. Um, Even asking for a grant that involved getting a license from the DEA, regardless of whether or not you would actually get the license, which was usually no. Just asking was a career ruiner.
Is it for like the reason I might guess? Is it like people think that you're being like a junkie or a hippie, or it's
There was an
unserious?
enormous amount of propaganda that was meant to slime the political enemies of Richard Nixon. That's why he's founded the DEA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they created a lot of propaganda that conflated psychedelic drugs with different categories of drugs that are inappropriate comparisons. They created a imaginary monster drug that had all of the downside of amphetamines and opiates, as well as having some mysterious quality of driving you completely insane if you even were standing in the same room with someone who had taken it, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Just the propaganda, unsophisticated propaganda too, but it works.
Right.
So, probably you've heard ridiculous stories like, hey man, I heard about that guy who took too much acid and he thought he was a glass of orange juice. And if he ever lied down, the juice would spill out of his head and he would die. So he spent the rest of his life standing up in a mental hospital.
Right.
You
Right.
ever hear that story? It's an urban legend.
It's stuff like that. Yeah.
That's been like proof positive traced back to the FBI spread that as a deliberate disinformation.
Yeah. The I just remembering that in like seventh grade we had this like mega assembly by some visiting like scare the shit out of the kids for their own good,
Mhm.
type thing, and she was saying that the three S's were of like bad outcomes or something were like sex, substances, and Satanism, and then told stories
I
about
like all of those things.
yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
And where can I get this?
Yeah, it was just stories about like how things had gone off the rails. We were like, the sex one, you can imagine some fucked up stories. Okay, the substances one, yeah, someone like blew their brains out, and then like the Satanism one is like they're putting organs in the refrigerator. But at the time, it scared the shit out of us, right? We were just like, oh no, like don't do those things. Um, yeah,
Right. And at the same time, we have to acknowledge what the actual consequences of psychedelics being driven into the underground were, which is um, you couldn't get reliably produced, safe, measured doses. Like everyone has had this sketchy experience of getting like a sugar cube and someone says there's acid on it. He's like, oh, is it acid? And how much? And they're like, I don't know, man. It's two hits. It's good. Just take it. Like, what the fuck does that mean? That's sketchy, man. Like,
right, right,
I want to get precise dosing. It matters a lot.
right. The um, not every I'm sure you've heard of Shulgin, though not everyone in the chat will have heard of Shulgin. He's an interesting character to hear. For anyone who hasn't heard of him, this guy Andrew Shulgin like invented and self-studied like some enormous number of molecules, and it was just classic kind of mad science style. Like, I don't know, I'll just eat it and see what happens.
Well, he was a master chemist. He synthesized all these new ones and he bioassayed them on himself.
Right, and I think some of his like research is gone. Like he like hid knowledge of some of these and some shit.
Oh yeah, his journals are circulating.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like a little bit of like a Leonardo da Vinci comes up with like the design for a tank, and it's like it's too powerful. Is my game freezing?
A little bit, yeah.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Wait, this is the Bermuda Triangle's kicking in, dude.
It begins.
It begins. Oh, shit. Dude, my game's just stuck. I hope my computer doesn't crash. Okay, no, we're back. We're moving.
I think it's time to take a turn. Let's head north. Or sort of northeast-ish.
Yeah. Into the deep.
So the thing I keep, going on about is creating a new cultural container for the reintroduction of psychedelics because things got all fucked up. Um, they're much less dangerous than they have been made out to be, but that doesn't mean that they aren't dangerous.
Right.
Um, we're very fortunate that there's this whole class of molecules, the tryptamine psychedelics, which appear to have almost no potential for physical toxicity. You can't take too much psilocybin and destroy your liver with it. You might not like
Right.
the experience, but there's no like overdose level that will kill you.
Right.
So
There's
they're
a
relatively safe in that respect. And the only thing that has to be managed then is the social stuff, the culture around it, the relationship people have to it. Um, and it's not so easy to solve. These things are called entheogens for a reason. They tend to get people into, you know, religious type places. Um,
right.
and this is where I think, the role of a reaction vessel, a crucible, comes in. That means you're set in your setting.
Hmm.
That's mindset and physical setting. Um, and it means being prudent, like knowing when you don't have the appropriate mindset. Um,
Right.
and how you might want to work with that instrumentally too, where if you're like really having a tough time and you take a trip, well, it's mind manifesting. So you're probably going to have a tough trip. On the other hand, that's not always a bad thing. I call these challenging experiences. And
Yeah.
it might, you might not have one of these sort of cosmic, unitive, beautiful kind of experiences. It might be like kind of living through a nightmare. Um, doesn't mean it wasn't worth doing. But I don't know. I feel like it's sort of perverse to tell people, I think you should have a bad trip.
Uh-huh.
On the other hand, I kind of do.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think so. I've done a whole lot of psychological exploration in my life, and sometimes involving substances. And I think there's some kind of powerful things that I've gotten on the other side of some number of bad experiences. And part of it is just a pretty damn deep certainty that I can make it through all kinds of bad things, including like depression, right?
Mhm.
Which things like that very much are psychedelic, or in a way, um, if I'm not using that term too wildly, right? Is that like your whole experience of existence and the feeling, the literal feeling of existence is different, right? So
Yeah,
uh,
yeah. I think it's a great metaphor to use because the word psychedelic means mind manifesting. So if you're depressed, you're manifesting depression in your life. Your energy level is low, your interactions are strained, you feel unenthusiastic. It's because that's
right,
how you're feeling. It's your mind, and that's how your life goes too.
right.
Totally appropriate. Doesn't have like the interesting swirly visual effects or feeling like you're stoned that you will get on mushrooms, but it's still a kind of psychedelic experience.
Yeah, and even that stuff, I'm a big believer in the idea that normal experience is way crazier than people realize, and they pay a different type of attention when a couple parameters get changed, or
Hmm.
even just when they're socially in a circumstance where they're like, oh, now it's a drug experience. Um, an example of this is like people seeing like buzzing or visuals when they look at like a blank wall. And this is something that people will often not report is happening, but then they'll be like, oh no, that's always been happening. And then some people will notice it on acid and then think it was permanent from the acid trip, right? But then some people will,
Oh, right, right.
you know,
There's this whole set of things called HPPD, it is like persisting psychedelic
yeah,
something. I don't know.
right,
And I tend to agree with you. Um, when a person comes in and says they're noticing more visual snow and weird sense processing artifacts, like it's not that you didn't experience that before. It's just now that you know they're there.
yeah. Well, it's you're tuned into the radio. It's like you're tuned into the data stream in a new way,
Yeah.
and it has these
It's so
artifacts.
interesting how it kind of flips a switch like that, where like there's this wrong interpretation of it, which is like you have drug residue in your spinal column and you're still tripping. Like, no, no, you're fucking not.
Right,
It's like your relationship with your sensory perception has changed and you can't squeeze the toothpaste back into the tube once it's been squeezed out.
right. Yeah, it's one of those things where when you're talking about like people's like mental experiences, like so many weird things have probably happened in so many minds, and it's like, how could you possibly think that you've accounted for all of them? But generally speaking, yeah, I'm with you. Um, do you have any stories for us?
Oh, I've got lots. I feel like in some respects it's a little tacky to like tell an actual trip report.
Yeah,
Um, and I used to be much more forthcoming with them.
yeah,
But there's a few that I've chosen to start speaking about less, just because I've noticed this thing when you have very moving, cherished experiences where you have a memory of them that you're trying to hang on to. And every time you actually retell the story of it, you begin to overwrite the memory with the story you told about it.
right. I think there's
Some of
some.
those I deliberately just don't talk about in a lot of detail. Um,
Yeah,
but
I respect that. That makes sense to me.
like certainly I've got lots, I don't know, I've probably got 50, 60 trips under my belt.
Oh wow.
Um, so not all of those were like huge mind-bending experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a half dozen of them were real breakthroughs, which means a lot of them were just fun.
Right. Totally.
Like, okay, eat some mushrooms and go hang out at a jam band concert.
Yeah.
Cool. Um,
Yeah.
I
That's
think that
no. Keep going.
I feel a lot more comfortable talking about the way that I generated those breakthrough experiences. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, if you've gone deep enough into psychonaut culture to hear a Terence McKenna ramble, you've probably heard him say five dried grams.
I've heard this name
Eat them
before.
alone in silent darkness, right?
Uh huh.
Um, he's talking about how to induce an entheogenic experience with a heroic dose.
Mm-hmm.
5 grams is more than enough. I feel like that's for most strains of psilocybin, that's about a saturation dose. So taking more than that just won't like you won't trip harder.
Uh huh. Uh huh. So this is a lot that we're talking about.
It's a fucking lot.
Uh huh.
Like compare this to I would call a museum dose, meaning like you can take this dose and walk around the Natural History Museum and like just enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
That's like 2 grams. 2 grams is a museum dose.
Okay.
An eighth, like that's the usual amount that you buy in from your garden variety drug dealer will sell you an eighth of mushrooms in a plastic baggie.
Uh huh.
That's 3.5 grams. If you eat an entire eighth, that's like a really fucking strong trip.
Mm-hmm.
I did most of my breakthrough experiences in the 3.5 to 4 grams range.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In fact, you're asking by volume. I'm not entirely sure. Um, I I would recommend weighing them always. The volume won't be constant, but the mass will. That's a better way to measure your dose. Um, like 3.5 grams would be like if you poured it out into like the cup of your hand, it would like really fill up the whole cup of your hand. It would be like you'd like be chomping on like multiple mouthfuls of them.
Haven't I heard stories of some guy who was mailing out like psilocybin like mushroom seeds in a pack with a book on how to grow your own?
Yes, that's been done by many people,
Uh
and
huh.
this is based on a legal loophole that said that the psilocybin molecule is illegal, but the
Okay.
molecule only appears in the mushroom,
Uh
and
huh.
the spores of the mushroom have not yet produced the molecule. So you can plant the spores yourself and grow your own mushrooms, and as long as you keep that shit secret, you're fine. It's not illegal to sell spore kits.
Is this that's totally wacky? Did they patch that?
Not really.
Uh
It's
huh.
been a minor concern, especially lately, since about 2015. A lot of states have been decriminalizing. Um,
Right.
but no, they never really prosecuted it because, like, these things never got scaled up to industrial production.
Hmm.
It's not like amphetamines where you
Fusion.
cook up a bathtub full of it and then you've got a million doses which are going to sell through a cartel.
Uh huh.
Like a mushroom growing kit will produce like I don't know 10 to 12 doses.
I see. I see. So there's not like a whole criminal empires living off of
Yeah,
them.
just the economics of it, the sheer level of effort involved is like a minor concern.
Right. Right. That makes sense. The so what is your vision? Like, what would the world look like where this was in the proper place? Like, some black pill part of me is like, we're gonna have these like shitty like massage envy like acid clinics where you like take a small dose.
Yeah, yeah, I see that. I want to address that, but let me just finish describing the actual like
Sure,
the breakthrough experience
totally.
container. So that's the dose level, 3.5 to 4 grams of psilocybin. If you were to be using LSD instead, I would, well, don't use LSD. The trip lasts too fucking long for that intensity level. You don't want to be tripping at that level for fucking 14 hours.
Mm.
Psilocybin is better for this type of experience. I would recommend LSD if you want to have a lower dose experience for a longer time, like going to a music festival. Um, so use psilocybin or something that has the appropriate dose response curve and half life, the duration of the trip. Um, um, be alone, or if you or have a sitter. A sitter should be a person that you trust and is committed to a certain neutrality. They shouldn't be trying to push an agenda on you, but they should be available for you if you want to talk to somebody. Um, I've done most of these alone. I've used a sitter a few times. I think they're both good, but um, if you're feeling nervous, find a sitter. Doing it alone is a little crazy. Um, make sure that you have your physical space set up correctly. You're going to probably experience certain amounts of body discomfort. So make sure you have a change of clothes or blankets or a cushy pile of pillows to curl up in. You probably don't want to do stuff like get in the shower in the middle of a trip. Sometimes you might feel that urge, resist it. It's not a good experience.
Hmm.
Um, a nice playlist of music is a good idea. Prepping the experience by sitting in meditation during the come up is a good idea. I recommend not journaling while you're tripping. Journal the day after as an integration experience, and have a trip buddy if you're not going to use a sitter. If you're doing it alone, make sure there's at least one other person who knows that you were tripping and can check in on you at the appropriate time. Yeah, come down weed is good. I agree, Vec. I'm quite the cannabis user though. If you're not so big on cannabis, you can skip that. Having something to relax with as you come down is good. So maybe your relaxing thing is just chamomile tea, but have a come down ritual. When you know it's time to end the trip, you will change the environment back to normal mode, which might mean like, putting the lights back on and cleaning up your ritual space and making yourself a cup of tea and eating a cookie or something. Have some snacks. You can really stress yourself out by not responding to like physical hunger or other body needs that come up during a trip. And you'll notice like towards the end of it, you're fucking starving. You haven't eaten all day. So have some light stuff. I like fruit. I like cookies, light and sweet things. That's my preference. Heavy carbs or heavy meat stuff, not a great idea during a trip, especially with mushrooms since they can be sensitive on the stomach. And maybe Gray is saying, what about setting intentions and creating sigils before? Setting intentions is a great idea. It's not necessary. Sometimes your baseline intention is just what's going on. That's fine. That's acceptable. But if you do have a more specific intention, it can be good to get into that. Creating sigils is a particular form of magical practice. I like it. I use sigils. They work well for me. If you have a different thing, use that. Whatever feels good to you. So yeah, that's sort of the setting. It's a sort of DIY home ritual experience with a lot of appropriate safety precautions put into place to make sure you can handle a high dose. And it gives you the confidence to know this is fine, this is safe. No matter what's happening in this space, that's what's happening in this space. I don't need to freak out or, don't need to call my parents. I don't need to call the cops. I don't need to call an ambulance. I don't, it's fine. We're good.
Yeah.
So that's the level of baseline safety you need to do one of those experiences.
Yeah.
And it still might not feel safe because you're going into like psychedelic hyperspace and who knows what the hell you're going to find in there.
Right. I kind of want to tell a story.
Please do.
So the story's not about me, but it's about a guy named Michael who has taken acid before. And what happened is, this was years ago, that he and his friend were in Golden Gate Park, and it started getting cold. So I'm just going to say we for this purpose of this story, but obviously this didn't happen to me. This happened to Michael. So what happened was we were getting kind of cold, and we realized too late that we had planned this poorly. These people were on acid, and we had planned this poorly because I lived across the water, across the bridge, and the timing of just like when we had gotten started and whatever. It's like San Francisco. It starts getting dark, and my friend has this idea that we're gonna go and get ramen, right? Because ramen is warm and it's gonna like, you know, cheer us up. So we end up getting in an Uber, and this Uber is just driving like, it feels to us like it's driving like crazy. I don't even know what is true, you know, about how crazy the drive was, but like, right, like this is just the situation we're in. End up at this ramen place. It's one of these like San Francisco like 35-minute wait, you know, things, and suddenly we've stranded ourselves in the fucking Mission, which, let me tell you, with the sights and smells and weird people around, was like, it was like walking through like a shallow tier of hell, you know, like,
I'll bet.
you know, just like, what is this place? It's dirty. We did end up getting food, and yes, we got burritos, and the finally I was like, listen, dude, we just got to get back to my place. Like, we got to go like straight to Oakland. I'll just get the Uber and whatever. Finally got out of there, and then we were both doing a lot better. Just kind of finally, it was just like cruising across the bridge, like getting some breeze, like getting out of all the like noise and chaos, and then we just ate a lot of food and chilled and watched a movie, and it ended up good. But it was just like a badly planned, in the sense that we had to like make active decisions that involve some degree of physical risk, right? You like crossing streets and shit. Super dumb, but worked out fine to these people, such as Bud.
Yeah,
Bike.
I too have had many urban psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
many awkward evenings walking around the East Village
Uh-huh.
on acid or something.
Yeah. It is one of those things where it makes you wonder, how often do I see somebody on the street and that person is just tripping and they don't look at like it at all or something?
Right, you never really know.
How often is like the food service person, you know, etc.
Yeah. Anyway, so I interrupted you. You had asked me a question and I forgot what you asked.
The question I asked oh yeah, the future. Like, what's your vision where this does get integrated and it's cool, you know?
So first I'll talk about what seems to be actually happening. The state of Oregon passed legislation in the last election that gave them a mandate to create a program for licensing therapists to do psychedelic assisted therapy with people. I think that this is strongly indicating that the place that mainstream society feels most comfortable integrating psychedelics is in medicine.
Yeah.
This is approximately the path taken by MAPS. That's the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, founded by Rick Doblin. They've advocated for lots of psychedelic stuff, but they're especially known for the work they've done with MDMA, which I think is basically a miracle drug, and cannot recommend it highly enough.
There's some like physical effects. Like physical damage from MDMA, right?
MDMA is not a psychedelic. It's a phenylethylamine. It's an atypical amphetamine. And it has some toxicity issues. It doesn't create the same sort of tryptamine experience that you get from acid or mushrooms. It is a beautiful, heart-expanding experience. I just go read the MAPS website. They're doing great work. They've focused in particular on people with PTSD, since it seems to be truly a miracle drug for treatment of PTSD. But it can be used therapeutically to treat many people.
So are there license?
Fucking ton of fun. Like recreationally, MDMA is probably my favorite drug.
Yeah, if only we had I need to get a sponsorship from the the place you said, MAPS or whatever. Wait, but you were saying that they're licensing people to do this.
In Oregon, they're going to start licensing therapists to work with psilocybin. That's kind of interesting. I think that we'll probably see small clinics. They'll probably be kind of expensive. they'll be expensive because of scarcity. They'll have more demand than they have access to provide services for. There are all kinds of concerns with what might happen when you start scaling up those services in the sort of capitalistic society we live in. It could turn into, like you were saying, the kind of psychedelic spa.
Yeah, yeah. Which could be good.
It's not going to be 100% bad, but
Right.
I think that it's one of the undesirable outcomes. It kind of trivializes it and makes it a consumer thing.
Right.
Um,
That's one thing I'm kind of interested in is like what this vision was of. I feel like in like I don't know what, maybe the 70s is like the hippie era. There was all this vision of it being this radically transformative thing for society, but then um, that is
yeah.
still held
Well,
by
so then
some.
here's another failure mode in psychedelics. A sacramental use of psychedelics in an ungrounded cult.
Hmm,
The worst possible version of this is the Manson family, who
hmm,
were a cult of hippies who were using lots of LSD and were also controlled by a paranoid schizophrenic sociopath.
mm-hmm.
Um, so there's your worst possible failure mode. Um, that is, of course, not the fault of psychedelics, because that was an example of a truly dysfunctional community that was using psychedelics in a probably kind of sacramental way.
Uh-huh.
Um,
What do you mean by sacramental?
I mean, they were part of the hippie subculture that really advocated for psychedelics for mind expanding,
Right. Got it.
going beyond the mere recreational notion of them.
Right.
This mind expanding thing is really closely aligned with the therapeutic model too, except they have different orientations. Where the therapeutic model starts from your mind is trapped in a dysfunctional pattern, and we can break the pattern and get you back up to normal. And the mind expanding model goes, the normal pattern of your life, adaptive and apparently fit for our society as it may be, is basically crazy bullshit.
Right.
And we can expand your mind into a higher consciousness.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Um,
So my aspiration for the best way to integrate psychedelics back in is closer to the mind expanding model than the therapeutic model, though I think both are valid. Um, except, this is like, how do you solve the problem of healthy religion? That's a
yeah.
hard one.
Right. It's interesting because what was the phrase you used? You had some kind of crucible type phrase.
Yeah, I was talking about a container for the psychedelic experience, which I called a reaction vessel or a crucible.
Yeah, I one of my very early YouTube videos I made was that part's not important to the story. I'm just so used to hyping my fucking shit since joining
Like
social
that
media.
channel.
Yeah, but I'll just tell you what happened in real life instead of the ℙ𝕙𝕝𝕚𝕝 version. When I was in Israel, I visited a bunch of churches in Jerusalem, and was thinking about this a bunch because the containers are different, right? It's like the different styles of churches are like amazingly different in terms of like the church that has like gold everywhere and like these like colorful murals, and there's Christ bleeding, and there's the dove in the ceiling or whatever, versus the like plain white walls, plain wood pews, a wooden cross on the wall. And it basically just got me thinking a bunch about how the physical environment is this like object our minds collide against, and the shaping happens both ways.
Yes,
So
super important. Um, Almost everything you see in churches and temples are either active or dormant or extinct attempts to create ritual spaces.
yeah,
And when they're active, they really have a lot of juice, actually. It's really fun to go and, see a ritual that's being done with some authenticity in it. The sparks start flying. There's still some magic in it. Those are quite rare, though. And you see a lot of, like, remnants of very ancient traditions here where they have, a, a secret shrine in the back of the church that holds some artifacts or relics or scrolls or something. And you have to have special ritual clearance to go and open the secret part, right?
right.
This implies things like initiation. This implies things like special revelatory experiences that were induced in the religious context of the temple.
Yeah.
And like, what do you keep in the fucking locked cabinet in the secret room in the back of the church, man?
Yeah. Right.
That's where I keep my drugs.
Yeah. Yeah. It is fascinating. I do think there's a whole rabbit hole here. Like I have been interested in one take is that a lot of times when you study all these occult practices or whatever, and what they did, you'll see like symbology, like, you know, earth, wind, fire, water, right? And there's a question of why are they doing that, right? Like, why are you talking about those substances and what is it about? One take I have is that by contemplating the phenomenology of different physical substances, you gain a lens for looking at your own mind that catches different stuff. So, yeah, that may just make sense as stated, but it's kind of like
this is explicit in Buddhist Tantra. They have an entire system of mapping elements to mind states.
Oh, cool! That's fascinating. I like when I think I'm right. I like when there's evidence that I'm right. The Vatican. Vec, what are you saying about Judaism being one of the rare religions that still does this? I think it's interesting with rituals. I've seen people try to make rituals and they kind of, and sometimes they kind of work a little bit. Marriage seems to be something that can be pulled off in a sense that the ceremony does clinch it and sort of make it a real thing in the social sphere and something just straightforward about it. What's up, Blunderbusted? Beast? Welcome.
He loves me more. He said it first.
Yeah, that's probably. But that's why the show's here. To bring you more charismatic people than myself.
That's the first time I've been accused of being charismatic.
No way. You have a chillness about you. That maybe it's just because we're talking about drugs that I feel like I'm recognizing that. You know what I mean? Just the whole.
I mean, I like drugs. It's a good conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe whenever your lawyer thing is done, you can feel free to give us a call. Let's look again at those questions we had.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh. Let's get an audience question from Twitter. Chaos Prime asks, what's so great about vegetative cognition that we should listen to it in preference to meat cognition?
Boom. First, explain what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah. So this is probably a reference to one of my long-running shticks about plant consciousness. And actually, this is quite related to what we've been talking about in terms of psychedelics. You asked me to share a psychedelic experience for you. Here's a summary of many of the experiences. Plants are conscious. Not only are they conscious, they're intelligent. Not only are they intelligent, they have an agenda and they care about you. Not only do they have an agenda and they care about you, but if you want to talk to them, they will talk to you too.
Holy shit, dude. They care about you?
Yes.
Aren't plants terrifying?
Some of them.
So a friend of mine who I think you definitely get along with because he loves Warhammer and loves psychedelics and loves to meditate. There's some chance that you know him in real life. But he one of his comments that stuck with me is that like trees are just waving their genitals all over the place and like throwing like eggs and sperm and shit. Like
it's just like a massive bukkake of tree pollen every spring.
Right. It's Lovecraftian, right? Think about these strange alien beasts. Okay, but you think they're conscious and they care about you.
Yes.
But please proceed.
Care does not necessarily imply positive regard, just that they have some investment in, how you behave around them.
I see. Okay.
So one of the things that I do truly believe is that the Neolithic Revolution that began with the invention of agriculture and especially irrigation was basically a psychic event that led to the creation of the class of egregores that we call the gods of the old world.
Oh, you think industrialism or agriculture?
agriculture. I'm talking about 12,000 years ago.
Okay, right.
Um, so this is when humans began transitioning from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to a sedentary farming city building lifestyle. Things that went along with that were the creation of the idea of property, of territory. Territory is older than that in its sort of tribal sense, but territory in the way that nations think of territory,
Mm-hmm.
ownership of land.
Right.
Um, the idea of sovereignty, the king, came out of this era. Um, and the idea of mass scale coordinated eusocial behavior as opposed to the more family oriented behavior, which has more direct genetic linkage. Whereas to get the level of eusocial behavior you see in humans, the next animal that you have to go to look at to find similar behavior is a fucking termite.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So why are we primates that live like termites? What the hell happened?
It's well put. Damn, dude.
So what I think happened is the grains happened.
Uh-huh.
The grains have this project to terraform the world into a monoculture of nothing but corn or nothing but wheat or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And they pursue the strategy that the angiosperms have perfected over millions and millions of years. Angiosperms are flowering plants. Flowering plants are specifically plants that have adapted to utilize symbiotic animals in their life cycle, right?
Wait, say that again? I just tweeted your comment.
Angiosperms, the flowering plants, are distinct from earlier plants in that the angiosperms require symbiotic animals in their
Okay.
life cycle.
Right.
They need pollinators, they need seed spreaders, they need defenders against predation, and so on.
You're totally freaking me out in the best way right now. Yeah, please continue.
Right. So these grain plants did a pretty unique take on the angiosperm strategy of recruiting an animal to advance their agenda.
Uh-huh.
The animal that wheat recruited was the Homo sapien.
Uh-huh.
It convinced Homo sapiens to stop moving around as hunter-gatherers and to stay in place and cultivate wheat.
Yeah, that's crazy, dude.
And the consequences of cultivating wheat is you fucking plow the fields, kill everything, remove all of the pests, and plant only wheat. And then you move the course of rivers in order to water the wheat.
Uh-huh.
And then you build giant fortress citadels to defend the territory that you planted wheat all over.
Uh-huh.
So something happened.
Yeah, that's a hell of a...
I call this the birth of the old gods, which are actually the result of the interaction between wheat and the other grains and the Homo sapien symbionts that have become bonded to it. The reason that we live like termites is because we have the same ecology of termites. Termites are farmers. Termites farm fungus.
Uh-huh.
This is what farmers do. They create gods, or maybe gods create them.
Connected the dots on the gods thing. So you're talking about the god comes out of the social relationship of like, it's like mankind.
It's a massive egregore. Yeah.
So mankind is relating to what the plants want.
Right. So what I'm saying is that that on a sort of genetic evolutionary strategy level, the wheat plants in whatever form, including possibly in the psychic manipulation of their own egregore, brought in a helper animal to do it for them.
Right.
And we are that helper animal. And that wheat egregore then transferred into the mental substrate of humans. So there's now the wheat farming egregore that is co-evolved. It's running simultaneously on the wheat stuff and on the human stuff. So there's now vegetable mind and animal mind working at the same time to form this gestalt entity. Anyway, so Chaos Prime asked, why should we prefer vegetable to animal? So I said, you shouldn't prefer it. You should understand the structure of this system, that we are as much plant as animal.
Man, there's something so deeply fucking alien about that. It's so amazing. It just so deeply alien about like thinking about wheat consciousness, except for it can't be alien because it's like ours. It's like,
it's us.
You know? Yeah.
All right, so here's a really, really scary extrapolation from it. We are currently experiencing a large-scale increase of the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, which is having consequences for the climate. the consequences are going to be sort of unpredictable in a lot of ways, and there's going to be, changes that we don't understand. But here's some things that we think we do understand. Um, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere is increasing, and the overall average heat of the atmosphere is increasing too.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know that wheat as a plant has a unique evolutionary adaptation in its carbon fixation cycle? It's called a C4 grain. It fixes 4 carbon molecules per metabolic cycle instead of 3, which is what most plants do. This is especially an adaptation for hot environments with lots of carbon in them.
Bro.
So I'm saying that
and our
there's a plausible story that wheat has forced humans into a style of civilization that is terraforming the planet into something more suitable for them.
This is like some kind of like additional dimensional take on paleo diet. Like when you add in the old gods and the wheat, because I've heard the wheat is ruining our civilization and it's a bad deal or whatever, but like
Yeah.
this adds something that I love.
But here's another one.
Yeah.
The great lie of civilization is that the grains are not psychoactive plants.
Uh-huh.
We say they're neutral. We say, they don't affect your mind. You can eat them every day. It doesn't get you high.
It's a good baseline.
About that? Are you sure about that?
Holy shit, dude. This is a thing. So I'm dieting right now, and I always go through this phase where I'm eating normal, which is just everything that I can see I eat, and then a couple days in, I have like a demon attack where basically some part of me is like, "You're not going off carbs. You're not going off sugar." It like throws a tantrum, and then a few days like later, I'm chilling and doing better. But there's always that adaptation. There's always that like reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably think that that's part of the software.
Something like that.
Yeah. Damn. Dude.
Anyway, so the grains are not the only plants that are intelligent. I don't claim to understand the entire system here, but there seem to be some pretty fundamental divides, like the grasses versus the trees.
Uh-huh.
They have different needs. They interact with animals in different ways. They're often in competition. An area will either be a grassland or a forest, but not both at the same time, and they sometimes fluctuate back and forth.
Mm.
The savannas in Africa are this sort of transition area where elephants have been bulldozing forests and making grasslands.
Uh-huh. Elephants been bulldozing forests and making grasslands. So another slave to the plant kingdom, presumably.
Yeah, something like that. And the trees have very different personalities. Grasses are like aggressive and hegemonizing and territorial, and the trees are like cooperative and I don't know if pacifistic is the right word, but they seem to generally have this more nurturing aspect to them.
Mm. The grass is kind of more Zerg-like.
Yeah, it's an aggressive colonizer.
Right. They're happy.
And if you look at the history of human civilizations too, you see this aggressive settler colonialism where you have like Europeans go and take over, say, the Americas, and displace these non-farming societies, people who are living in forests, bulldoze the forests and plant grass fields.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Damn, dude. I want to like read sci-fi. I want a sci-fi short story on this, like something where this is the setting,
Yeah, there's an idea. I don't think I've read this actually. This is like my own particular lunacy.
Well, it's I mean it is Lovecraftian. I think I think it is that cosmic horror genre, arguably. You don't necessarily one does not necessarily have to be horrified by it, so there's sort of a different takes, but like I think he was freaked out by like the ocean and space,
Yeah, it's too damn big. It's really fucking weird.
Yeah, like what? Like we don't. Ocean freaks me out, dude. Like we don't know what the fuck's in there. Like I don't know. It's interesting. It's just like the ocean.
Speaking of which, how are we doing on this Bermuda Triangle? What are our coordinates?
Well, if you can see on this little map, we are due east of Miami, and still some ways from Puerto Rico, maybe
Yeah.
a third of the way or something. But are we in the triangle?
Where's Bermuda? That's its northern point.
Let's get back up our Bermuda Triangle image, Johnny. We have. Oh yeah, we're going here. Yeah, we're there.
We are in it.
We're in it.
Cool. See, this is a great evening where you fly into the center of the Bermuda Triangle and talk about the wheat god overlords.
The wheat gods. Damn, the ruinous thing we found in the triangle was conceptual, but what could be more dangerous?
We've released some Keter class info hazards today.
Yeah, dude. I can also throw in some. I can make it rain. Here we go. Let's try this for a minute.
Spooky.
Yeah. All right, what do we got? Blunder. We got some wacky conversation going on here. Agree about the ocean, yes. Panpsychic entity, intercommunication between micro mega flora fauna. Proper idea of how these elements interact rather than one part considering itself dominant. Yeah, I think in general, just sci-fi that takes environmentalism seriously. Like one of the cooler ones I've seen is just Dune, right? Like that has this like relation to the environment as a theme, and I find that cool.
Dune is a great story, though it's like shallow geopolitical metaphor is a little troublesome.
Uh-huh. How do you interpret it?
Well, it's clearly about oil in the Middle East.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I can definitely supersede that.
But I love the Dune mythos also, which has been an enormous inspiration to the Warhammer stuff I talked about. So
Right.
it's all good.
Right. Vectin, why are you in the lobby? Do you have another question? Maybe he's just hanging out in the lobby. Did I miss that you have a question? We had a maybe question. Potentially. Chilling. Alright, cool. I did have a question that was one of maybe's questions, which is let me navigate to it. Are there any social projects like book club, Twitch channel, group chat, Zoom conversation, shared Spotify, etc., that you would start if you knew there would be some interest in it from online friends?
That's a great idea. The first thing that comes to mind is the thing I was talking to you about yesterday of doing like a YouTube channel of really concise monologues as some sort of midpoint between like the full blown podcast and this sort of like talk show environment.
Uh-huh.
That's not exactly a social experiment, though. It would be cool to sort of make like a magazine out of it. It's not that different than like the TED Talk or the Big Think format, except I would just want to be way more like grungy and silly with it.
Yeah. What kind of stuff would you talk about? Like how would you do it? How might you do it?
Just sort of going down rabbit holes, like a lot of the way this conversation tonight has been. You could sort of take any arbitrary 15-minute clip of it, and that would be a good sample.
Right.
But like an interesting place to explore ideas in a really free form way, where you don't have to like be at the level of rigor of a blog post where you got to have citations and sound like you know what you're talking about, or else but like just run with those shower thoughts. Just record it and clean it up a little bit so it's not filled with weird convolutions and pauses and ums and ahs. Try to get like a little script so you sound coherent. But really just run with wild ideas in kind of freeform way.
Yeah, that ℙ𝕙𝕚𝕝𝕚 thing I made, which for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's like a 30-minute recording. That was one of the easiest things I've ever made, and just because somehow I was able to just because I just love that book and I love thinking about it, and I was able to just do that while the record button had been hit. I think people have content. Like, people have stuff they want to talk about if you can find it. This is something I've talked to Vectin about as well, because he does his podcast. Oh, we got Maybe in the lobby. Maybe if you're ready, I'm.
Yeah. Well, so before she hops in, I guess I just want to finish answering the question.
Yeah.
Since she was asking specifically about more socially oriented things, and that's more of a solo thing, though it would be cool to have collaborators and sort of make a magazine kind of thing out of it. But socially, one of the things I've tried to do in a very private, direct outreach, small scale kind of way is psychedelic education and integration support. And maybe I should make a dedicated Slack for that, or Discord for that, or whatever. I could put some organizing tools behind it, just so people would be able to find me more easily. It's something that I really appreciate doing. I sort of feel called to it, and I think I can help people with that. Connect, build out the network of people who are interested in this kind of thing, and almost sort of like establish a community of practice around it, so we can start really sharing those the norms and values, as well as the pragmatic stuff.
Totally. That does seem like it would be super useful for a lot of people. So, by integration support, you mean kind of like, this is the post game, like what was that? What does it mean? What do I do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Well, if you do a ramble, I'll check it out. If you record a ramble,
all right,
let me know.
I should start cooking up some of that stuff.
Totally. All right, let's grab Maybe. Maybe.
Hi.
You're on once again. Philosophers on Twitch playing Flight Simulator. How are you doing?
I'm so excited. I have been just loving this episode. I have been really excited. This is all stuff that interests me a lot, and I just think Dan is like crazy smart. So I've been especially not paying attention to class today.
Excellent. That's our goal.
I missed maybe the last thing that got said about, like, I heard you were talking about, like, if there was something more collaborative that could be under this, like, social projects umbrella, but I don't know if anything came out of that question.
Yeah, I just suggested maybe trying to do some more organization around setting up a psychedelic community of practice.
Oh yeah, see, that would be amazing, because I think that your advice and guidance is like so invaluable. Like, in my own like experience of being a little mini psychonaut, like, I've had so much better results since I've met you and like taken in your advice, instead of just like getting high with a crowd of people at a music festival and hoping for the best. Not that those weren't great experiences, but definitely like having a little bit more intention and refinement and precaution has like and integration especially has made it a way more transformative experience and a way less disruptive experience for me.
Well, that's great. I'm really happy to hear that. I've been told similar things by other people I've worked with, so that's what I'm saying. I sort of feel called to do this, because I have no idea how I ended up having a knack for this, but I seem to at least have figured out something that works for some people some of the time, so that's probably worth sharing.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially I find that I'm like particularly sensitive to a lot of psychedelic substances, and so the like run-of-the-mill advice that I would find on Reddit would probably like dose me at a higher level than is really necessary for me.
And they're almost like competitive in their dose levels. They're like trying to show off. It's stupid.
That's terrible.
Yeah, that is something that I really appreciate about you, is that you're not like just do it.
Well, I had a conversation with a guy a couple of weeks ago who was about 6 months into a psychedelic journey, coming from very little experience with it, and he was going just full tilt, like really jumped off the deep end. And he seemed to be doing okay. Like he had a lot of other good things going on in his life. But when he was talking to me about his dose levels, he was like, "Oh yeah, I take like 8 or 9 grams." I'm like, what? Like, what the fuck are you doing, buddy? And he's telling me all
Yeah.
these things like, oh, I feel like shit the day after. I'm like, can't get out of bed. I've got a pounding headache. I'm like, buddy, like you just took too much. And so I said earlier that with psilocybin, about 5 grams sort of maxes you out, and when you take more than that, you don't really trip harder, but you do start building up more of the body load because it's a mushroom. It's not a pure chemical, and there are side effects to psilocybin besides tripping. Um, so you're like increasing the body load, you're increasing the nausea, you're increasing the tremors and nervous system disruption without actually having a better trip for it, right? He just didn't know. He just didn't know. He just thought like, let me go pedal to the metal. Like, you know, I bought 6 grams. I'm gonna eat all 6 grams. Like he wasn't thinking about it.
Yeah, and it feels like there are some things that is like, if you buy some weed, it's like cheap, it's not super intense. If you smoke way more than is actually going to do anything for you, it's like not a huge loss.
Fall
The
asleep.
hangover is not bad. Yeah, exactly. Greening out is fine. But things like this, you, well, you can waste like I don't know. There's and I maybe I okay. Well, one thing I should clarify is that I used to be like a daily stoner, and not just like a daily stoner for people who don't know, but like all day stoner a lot of the
Quantity.
time when life
Really
wasn't
heavy.
great. Yeah, exactly. Like a normal amount of weed. I had a friend at a music festival once tell me that they saw me smoke more weed that weekend than they had smoked like in an entire year, and they were like twice my size, and so it
Like
was like
Method Man.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
There's this
So
great anecdote I know about Method Man. He was like touring with the Wu-Tang Clan. He checks into a hotel and he asks if there's smoking in the rooms. They say, no, we're going to charge you if you smoke in the room. He goes, all right, how much? And he goes, sir, we're telling you don't smoke. He says, I know, but we're going to smoke. So how much?
yeah, put it on my tab.
Yeah.
Basically. And it was a lot. It was an expensive luxury hotel and they billed him an extra like $10,000 because he smoked. And he was like, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I live a little bit of a blessed life. I maybe was born with like a very small silver spoon in my mouth, and I often think it's like, oh, I'm so glad I haven't had more money because I would have made even worse decisions. Um, but yeah, so I think that sometimes I can like in retrospect talk about weed like it's not a sacred substance, and I'm really interested to see like I haven't smoked in 2 months. Woo, go me.
Mm.
But I imagine that I might be able to respect it on the same level of sacredness as some of these other substances in the future, having just I don't know a less codependent relationship with that entity. Um, but it does feel like these other substances, like having had much more intentional experiences with them, having like had your guidance, I like look back on the way that I interacted with them before, and it feels like such a missed opportunity. And like I don't want to like shame anyone, including myself, but it does feel like low key disrespectful. Like there's just something so profound about the experiences that you can have when you take, the right precautions and give yourself the right container, that it feels like in retrospect it was like, yeah, I have some regrets about like doing them flippantly.
Hmm. I mean, I've been advocating all night long, but I do want to clarify. Um, I'm not against recreational use as long as you're responsible about it.
Yeah, and I don't know that I was, and I think that that like not only did it damage my relationship with the entities, it did damage the relationships that I had with other people. Like I became somebody that people were less felt less safe tripping with in the future. And I think I've
Um,
rehabilitated a lot of that, but because I've like learned to like make sure that you take the right dose and give yourself the right setting and have the right intentions and make sure there's like a good ratio of like high people to trip sitters and that kind of thing. But a lot of the times I'd be at music festivals taking the same dose as everybody else in like this very public, like very long term kind of scenario. And I would not really be psychologically prepared to handle what I was going through. And other people would have to pick up the slack for me. And it like didn't feel like as much fun for them to be at the music festival with me because I was like
yeah,
not aware of who I was as a person. And they were just trying to like hang out
it's
in the
just a little
river.
ego death. It wears off.
Yeah, it does. But for a while, I was like, I don't know. I remember once we were doing it with my friend at a music festival, and it was their birthday. I didn't know who I was, so I kept saying it was my birthday. And just like this little thing of like I like stole their birthday thunder because I thought that I was them, and they were like, I didn't like that, and I'm like, I'm so sorry.
It's funny.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you're talking about having a more sacred relationship with cannabis. I agree that that's very possible. And the first thing it made me think of is this. I'm going to link this in the Twitch chat. This is a Chinese deity called Magu, who is associated with the hemp plant. And I love the imagery here, where she's always portrayed as this like deeply sensuous and like honestly hot young woman.
Yeah.
And this is talking about all kinds of relationships that people have with the cannabis plant, whereas an extremely useful plant for its fiber and its seeds, as well as producing drugs. So, they really view this as a sort of fertility goddess kind of thing, or the bounty of the earth. But
I threw
I think
Magu up on screen.
yeah. There's some other good pictures in that article too. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll see some other versions of it. But the iconography is always very, very clear. She's wearing a sort of rural costume, and is always a very young and fertile, sexy looking young woman.
Yeah, it's funny. I had joked about in the past that like Mary Jane was my girlfriend. And it was something that like would more seriously come to mind when I was contemplating like changing my relationship with it, because it was like, if this was really my girlfriend, I'm like just getting them to do all this emotional labor and having nothing really to give in return, and having like, I don't know, I'm not like an abstinence minded person, so like to take a break from it is something about like resetting, not like rejecting entirely. But I have really felt called, like the longer I stay away from it, the more I want to have a relationship with it that's special, and like it feels like, yeah, I don't know, I want to take things to the next level with her. I don't want it to just be casual anymore. I want to be like, baby, let's go out. I want to take you to dinner. You're not just my booty call anymore.
Oh,
I kind of get that too. Like I'm thinking about like the first time I smoked weed with my parents. It had that same sort of emotional tension of like taking a girlfriend home to meet your parents for the first time.
Aw,
uh-huh.
that's adorable. I have often thought about like introducing my parents to some sort of substance. I did go to on vacation to Amsterdam once, and they did try some cannabis with me there because it was legal and it was everywhere, and that was really fun. That was like a cherished moment. But
Nice.
I've thought about like if a family MDMA jam would be something that would be really bonding and lovely. But it's interesting. It's like vulnerable. There's like I think 𝕙𝕤𝕤 has a movie where he tries to get his like dad and his cousin to like take MDMA with him, and it's like a whole thing. And so I've always been like, I don't want to have my 𝕙𝕤𝕤 moment.
Yeah, I wonder. Sometimes
So,
I think about what would have happened if my parents had had access to MDMA therapy at crucial points in their life, where they're experiencing like real rough patches in their marriage, or real like deep periods of depression, or like trauma from, like, for example, my mother experienced a lot of this, where her older sister died of cancer, and then almost immediately after that happened, my grandmother got sick and my mother became her primary caretaker. Very like difficult, heavy, traumatizing experience, which clearly made an impact on her. And like it's a very pleasant fantasy for me to say, like, imagine if, yeah, a lot of
mhm.
pain could have been avoided.
Yeah, I feel really lucky to have like a pretty open relationship with my parents. A lot of that is just because I'm like a compulsive oversharer and I can't really spend time with
You
people
really?
unless Me? What? Yeah, no, nobody's picked up on this. Yeah, so I tell them all about my experiences in every realm of my life, whether they're like normal parent-friendly topics or not. And my mom talks a lot about just feeling like she would be so afraid to give up control. Like she, if anything, has like maybe her poison of choice would be alcohol, and I think it's because it's something that's like got very moderate incremental effects, and she feels like very in control of how far outside of her normal experience of things she is with that. And yeah, and
too. I mean, she might enjoy
yeah,
experimenting with that.
yeah, I think that I mean when she tried it in Amsterdam, it was a lot because it was legal, and that's like one of her big barriers to things. And now I'm in Canada, so that's not a barrier for us anyway. I think the other barrier is she used to be a cigarette smoker for a long time, so I think that she like would avoid smoking it probably. But yeah, but then like the idea of taking something else with her, I do like when she expresses these fears about like giving up psychological control. I know how that feels. I know that apprehension in myself too. But I know what's on the other side of it. And so I like have these mixed feelings about inviting her into like a space that would be scary but maybe growthful for her.
Yeah.
And especially with something like MDMA, like I find that I have what I've called the icky sticky threshold feeling coming up on that. And like I get this feeling of like not feeling comfortable in my own skin and feeling like a little bit dissociated from my personality, and like it's like a bubble of ickiness that pops, and then I feel really amazing.
Yeah.
But I know that from experience, and it would be like I would have like trouble coaching somebody for the first time through an experience like that who hasn't had similar experiences with psychedelics.
I mean,
I feel like
I've been through enough drug come ups to just shrug at it and be like, it'll pass, fine.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of how I felt when it first happened to me. It was like, I feel weird, but what else is new when you try a new drug for the first time? You feel weird at first. Psychedelic zit metaphor is a very funny idea coming up in the chat. Yeah, I feel like this is the kind of thing that would be really interesting to be able to talk about in like a psychedelic club, if there was like something like that you created that was like, how do I explain to my mom that like come up passes or something?
Something better than Reddit, basically.
Yeah, better than Reddit. You could even call it that.
Google search results return. Like, I'm recalling this very awkward experience I had when I was telling my parents that I was going to travel abroad to go attend an ayahuasca ceremony. And they had lots of questions, and I didn't feel like sneaking out like a thief in the night and just being like, oh yeah, never mind, I don't talk about that. Like, no, I'm also open with my parents. I tell them this kind of stuff. They'd never heard of ayahuasca, and they were, understandably interested and also slightly concerned. So, as soon as I get off the phone with them, my mom gets on the computer and she starts Googling. And the stuff that turns up is
the worst shit you can imagine, probably.
Some of it's like, I don't know, maybe they found Arrowwood Vault stuff, which is a kind of mixed bag, even if are some good resources there. Stuff on Reddit's, which I think she probably ignored because that's, she's a boomer. She doesn't go to Reddit.
Right.
The stuff that she actually clicked on was like, there was an article on Vox.com that had been written by one of their dudes who wrote, she sent me the article in an email, and it was like, while there wasn't anything that I thought in the article was really factually inaccurate, it was reported fairly in some sense. The perspective of the author was so like head up his own ass, really, really going deep onto this sort of absolution of sin metaphor. Like he like,
Whoa.
Oh man,
his whole experience was just so much of dealing with his like sense of shame and self-loathing, and like ayahuasca is famous for like really bringing up a lot of dark shit, and I can confirm from my experience too that like it's the full hero's journey. You like descend into the underworld, you look at your demons and your shadow side, and maybe hopefully sort of come up into a state of grace afterwards. But the way that this author wrote it up was like inflected with the editorial preferences of Vox.com, and you can imagine how that goes. So this is the kind of
Yeah.
stuff that my mom was reading when I told her about ayahuasca. And like, this is awkward. This is not exactly like the impression I want her to have of this.
Because then you're
Yeah.
playing defense. Then you gotta like counter all the notions rather than kind of setting it up how you want to explain it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's annoying to be in a reactive framing where the conversation is sort of about an article instead of being about something I'm doing in my life.
Right.
Yeah, personally, I found that with my parents, it's like hard not to end up in that reactive place, even if they don't like trust Google or something like that. It's like they were raised in a generation that's so reactive around any of these, like, I don't know, things that from their time were considered really countercultural, like talking to my parents about sexuality or experimenting with relationship structures or, being a little psychonaut or even just like not wanting to vote. Like, all of these things get these like reactions from my parents. Like, are you okay? What's wrong with you? What did we do wrong to wreck you in this way?
Yeah, I've definitely had like this series of things that I've explained to my parents over the years, including just weird beliefs. Um, that these days I'm like, hey, I'm gonna eat meat for a month. They're just like whatever, you know.
Oh, that's just Michael doing one of his things
This is
again.
one of those things. There will be a moment of like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I did that. And they're like, all right. It's just like that engagement has burned out, and they can see that I'm more or less happy and healthy. So
Yeah, it does feel like my parents do like as much as like individual categories of things that I bring up with them sometimes get this like conditioned reaction of what the fuck.
mm,
Um, in general, if I'm getting happier and my relationship with them is getting closer, they're pretty okay with stuff and they don't push back hard. I had a period of time when I was like in my late teens when I was very estranged from my parents and I like moved out and dropped out of school and like was struggling a lot and feeling really bad about life and stuff in general. And so like having gone through sort of this like dark night of our parent child relationship, anything that doesn't seem like it pulls me in that direction anymore is like something that they're willing to accept as a benefit, even if it's something that's kind of a culture shock for them.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I've experienced that too. Um, Changing the relationship that you have with your parents as an adult, which is different than the way you related to them as an adolescent and as a child, is really hard. And I sometimes get weirded out when I realize that there's some snapshot in my parents' minds that they have of me that hasn't been updated since I was 22 years old.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah, and at the same time, I see a lot of like mostly in social media, like Twitter and whatnot, like I don't know, almost prideful accounts of people who are like, I don't relate to my parents anymore. They were terrible. I've given up on our relationship. And maybe it's like a conservative thing for me, but I see that as like a real lost opportunity. I'm like so glad that I didn't get stuck in a place where I felt like I couldn't have them in my life, because it was so growthful for me to work on our relationship and hash out the things about my childhood that I didn't like. Oh my gosh, Vecnan's just calling me out and saying that this is me every episode, and I'm dead. It's true. It's true. I'm sorry.
no, wait. What
But
do you?
yeah, I do.
No, we love having you on. We love having you on. Maybe we could co-host one. I don't know what the right format. We like co-host like with
Talk
like a
about
bunch
our
of people
family
coming through.
relationships for the entire episode.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, I could.
just grill. We could
I would
grill
live
people
for
about their
that.
parents or something. You know.
Oh yes, please
You
let
make
me
your
amateur
parents call
psychoanalyze
into a
people.
show.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
oh
parent
my
call.
god.
Is that too terrifying to consider?
My dad was like, "Hey,
No,
you should
it's
have me
not
on the
really.
show."
You,
um,
yeah, Michael, you should interview your parents.
I
Get your
thought
dad on the
about
show.
it. I
That'd be
did
cool.
think about it. I'm still thinking about it. I don't know. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
really
I
want
mean
to
I
start
fly with you
recording
every
interviews
Tuesday.
with my parents to have a like an audio record of how they sounded and what they like to talk about.
I've actually been hoping to interview my parents about stories about the grandparents and the family history type stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I had an ex-boyfriend who was like very all in about that. Like, you need to like have your ancestral record before it's inaccessible to you. And at the time I thought it was really cool. And now it's like tainted with the ex-boyfriendness. But I still like I can see the I have a really bad relationship with my grandparents, so I like want to draw the line there and be like, no, I don't need to know about them. But
Right.
with my parents, I feel like, oh yeah, like there's so much to be gained with like maintaining those ties, because they're way more a part of you and you're like shadow than you understand. And if you cut off access with it, I think it like the history repeats itself in you a lot more than you think you're going to be able to control.
Yeah.
Sorry, someone distracted me by asking if my dad had a bigger mustache than me. The answer is he does not. He does not.
What's his shoe size?
It's his shoe size. I think he probably has smaller feet than I do. I think I'm tall from the other side of the family.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I have smaller feet than my mom. Does that mean the same thing for women that it is rumored to mean for men? I don't know. I hope so.
Smaller socks.
That's me repping myself.
Smaller socks.
Yes. Yeah, they never say that about women. They never say, "Oh, smaller shoes."
Yeah, smaller shoes, smaller socks.
Okay. With that, I should leave you guys and let free up the line for other callers and not co-host the show without permission anymore.
Surprise co-host. Yeah, maybe we should. Let's make some stuff. Let's make something. I don't know what. Let's make a thing.
I love that idea. I will DM you.
Dope.
Okay.
Dope. See you later.
Bye.
Oops. Dropped her into gaming. Now she can go talk to back then. Sweet. Dan, so we're technically at 3 hours or a little over 3 hours, and I don't know what your schedule is, how tight things are. If you want to hit some more questions from Twitter, or if we have anybody in chat right now who has something they want to ask Dan as like a final thing.
Let's do a lightning round to close out with.
Yeah, lightning round?
Yeah. Hey. Rapid fire questions that I won't go on a rant on. I'll just answer quickly.
All right, so I can rapid fire you, but chat, if you got questions, blitz Dan. What do we also have from the chat? We had... All right, boom. Why are we so bad at learning from history?
Because nobody reads.
What does the telltale heart say?
Pump.
Did you say pumped?
Pump.
Pump. I think that is all the Twitter questions. All right, I'm gonna rapid fire you. Let me think. Spirit animal.
Oh, I have several spirit animals. The most important ones are spider and heron.
Ooh, that's very interesting. Wait, why a heron?
What does it have in common with a spider?
Long limbs.
True, but what else does it have in common with a spider?
Well, what else does it have in common with a spider? I'm like, it eats fish? No. What does it have in common with... Does it make like a nest, a special nest that's kind of like a web or something like that?
No. Patience. They both hunt with patience. A spider constructs a web and then waits for the trap to be sprung. A heron stands in perfect stillness in shallow water until a fish swims right by its legs, and then it spears it with its beak. And it has to sit there patiently waiting for something to wander into the trap.
Sick. Why are you like those? In what way? How do you think of that?
No, it's just my personality. I have this sort of like latent scheming supervillain side to me.
Hell yeah. All right. All right. Yeah, no, I like that. Wait, hold on. What is a cryptid? People say cryptid. Is that like a cryptozoology?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your favorite cryptid?
Favorite cryptid? Man, I don't know. Any of the like internet meme cryptids, I'm just not that interested in. So I'm not gonna say like fucking Mothman or the New Jersey Devil. Like I don't, who cares?
Yeah.
I want to say that the entire category that you see in mythology, they're called perianthropes. Those are
How do we spell
figures that
this?
have animal parts and human bodies, usually the head of an animal.
Uh-huh.
Those are cool. I really like perianthropes.
Perianthropes?
Therianthropes.
Very
THERE, something, I don't know.
cool. Therianthropy. Cool. And that's across cultures. Like you're including like
Yeah,
the
yeah, you see these
Egyptian.
all over the place. I mean, bird-headed men, wolf-headed men, lion-headed men, elephant-headed men, that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Right. Um, I have been told that on the Italian side of my family, my great grandmother would tell the like Wolfman story and believe it. Like this actually happened. A guy would go out once a month at the full moon and tell his wife, "If I come home, you got to make me put my hand under the door, and if it's furry, don't let me in." And this was it actually happened.
What is the role of psychedelics in addressing atomization? If you were drug czar and we just got total legalization tomorrow, would you prescribe any low-hanging fruit for a use case? Psychedelics seem niche. Would you prescribe mass market shrooms? Um, what is, these are hard questions to ask in a lightning round format. The role in addressing atomization is if they encourage people to make changes to their atomized lifestyle, right? That's the only thing that can do it. There's no magic trick besides that. If I was drug czar and we got legalization, what are low hanging fruit for use cases? Um, I would want the relationship the government should have with them should be similar to the FDA. They should make sure that psychedelic products are inspected for purity and efficacy and safety, and they should have very little role besides that. Um, Psychedelics seem niche. Would you prescribe mass market shrooms? No, no, absolutely not. I don't think that you should be able to. Um, you shouldn't be able to go to a psychiatrist and talk them into having some sort of DSM, disorder that they prescribe psilocybin for.
Mm.
And you shouldn't be able to, walk into a cafe and buy a bag of mushrooms like you would buy a bag of weed. It's not like that. Um, I don't have a great answer here, honestly. I think that they're they're potent enough and potentially dangerous enough that I would want them to be handled by trained people like psychedelic facilitators. Um, I'm deeply wary of certain styles of psychedelic facilitators that I talked about earlier, like the psychedelic day spa thing is a turnoff to me.
Yeah.
Um, but but I think that ultimately there is going to need to be a mediation layer. I wouldn't want to just toss these things out into the wild.
That is a great answer. Um, any mythological character you identify with or find significant or particularly significant?
Many of them. Let me rattle off some of the members of my pantheon. These are entities that I have some sort of working relationship with.
Hmm.
Let's start with Hermes. Um, let's go with a couple of figures from Buddhism like Guan Yin and Jizo. Um, let's say Ganesha is important in his role as the remover of obstacles. Um, and I seem to have some sort of pretty special relationship with Anansi the spider.
Uh-huh. I love Anansi. Um, quick story. When I was a kid, I had this book, Dragons, and Other Creatures That Never Were by Eric Carle. Um, and it has all these different mythological characters and monsters and stuff. It has Ganesha in it, and with the many arms, the pink elephant, and describes him as a god. And I believed that that was what God looked like the God they were talking about at my Hebrew school. I went through a period where I was like, that's what God looks like, is Ganesha.
Yeah, and in traditional Hinduism, they'll have an idol of Ganesha in the shrine, and when they do darshan, they say that is Ganesha. The idol literally is.
Uh huh. Well, um, Extra had a question about the same about common Western meditation methods.
What's the question here?
I don't know. He said same answer for common Western meditation methods. Maybe he's asking about like distribution, or I'm not actually sure what the question is. Um,
I mean, I guess I can say that I've practiced contemplative and spiritual techniques of both the East and the West. Um, my more intensive and active training at the moment is in Vajrayana Buddhism, which is an Eastern technique. Um,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, there's all this Western esoteric stuff that's interesting and fun, and I've gotten my fingers into it.
Oh yeah. By the way, this might not be a bad time just because I didn't want to forget to do it. Um, for you to mention the one of the projects you're working on. The
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's plug the meditation school. Um, the name of it is Evolving Ground. The lead facilitators of this are Charlie Aubrey and Jared Janes. I'm an apprentice and student of the school, and I endorse it. I think it's great. If you really want to learn some meditation methods that are drawn from the tradition of Vajrayana Buddhism, but recontextualized into something that works well for Westerners living in America, I think it's a great resource, and I would encourage you all to do it. You can reach out to me on Twitter, or Charlie Aubrey, or Jared Janes, or if you Google search Evolving Ground Meditation, you'll probably find a link to the Patreon page, which is a good place to find the right resources. There you go.
sweet. Yeah, I mean, having now, so I know Charlie a little bit, and I mentioned you, and now having met Dan, I feel like whatever they're putting together there will be sick. Um, what types of ways to get involved with that are there? Is it like can you attend a SID or something, or how do you guys do that?
The Slack is free. You don't need to be a contributor of any kind to get invited to the public Slack.
Right.
Um, there have been some um, internet salon type appearances, like there are some Stoa sessions. If you go to the Stoa website or YouTube channel, you can find recordings of them where they've talked about their orientation to practice and some discussion and audience questions there that will give you a more clear idea about where they're coming from. I would say that the main thing that we're teaching in terms of practice is the four Naljors. Those are the preliminaries to Dzogchen, the most basic of which is called Shine. That means calm abiding or clear mind practice, um, and is a sort of foundational meditation practice, which is this system's version of like Zazen or Shamatha or mindfulness practice.
Perfect. Sounds great. Um, all right, dude. Do you have anything else for me, or shall we call it? We seem to have survived our adventure into the Bermuda Triangle, and I shifted it to a pleasant sunset scene.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let's just fly off into the sunset.
Fly off into the sunset. Thanks for coming by. This was super fun. I'm glad to have had a chance to chat with you. Great as always to have maybe have Vectin on. Everybody in the chat. I'm seeing some new faces. Welcome Hark Extery. Math's pretty hard. People hopped in and out during the whole thing. Meta Potato. Um, yeah, it's always good to have a crew. Um, and here's our sunset. All right. Have a good night, everybody.
It was super fun. Good night, everyone.